Good evening, everyone. How are we all doing? Hey, Jono. Hey, Dave. Hey, Lilibels. Hey, Craig. Hey, Frida. Hey, Chris. Hopefully, more people come. I was Dave, Lilibels, and Chris. I've just made you guys all standard moderators as well as Hey, Rob. I would just ask if mods can share the various links for Tony for responsible replicant within the chat, especially the website. And people, if you haven't joined, please go and join or donate. We'll hopefully have that in the chat throughout, but also things like YouTube channel, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook as well. They're right at the top of the chat as well, and also in the description. But welcome, Tony, of Responsible Replicant, and thanks for coming on. Oh, I can't hear you. I can't hear you, Tony. Can everyone else hear Tony?
That should be better.
I can hear you now.
Sorry about that. Mute technology. I don't think this internet thing is going to catch on. It's just too complicated and unreliable, isn't it?
Doesn't seem that good, does it? This internet thing.
People will be over it. Yeah, thanks for having me.
No, I'm looking forward to this one. And I've been saying to people, I think it's probably one of my most important streams that I'll have done. This probably alongside when I had Benjamin Kennedy on, who's an invert vet, discussing invert parasites and stuff. And there was a bit of a issue last year, sort of thing. So I think this is up there, if not even more important. But first of all, hey, Don, anyone who perhaps hasn't heard of you, doesn't know, who you are, what Responsible Reptile Keeping is. Do you want to give yourself a bit of an introduction into yourself?
Yeah, it's me or Responsible Reptile Keeping. How long have you got? Where shall I start? So I'll start with what is essentially the shortest version of what Responsible Reptile Keeping is. And that is we're essentially a dedicated media department for the international exotic reptile pet trade and pet community. So the reason we were formed in a nutshell is because for 15, 20 years, our opponents have been basically saying what they like about us online. And by our opponents, I mean the people who want to stop us from keeping animals. And this might be reptiles, or it might be any pet, and it could be invertebrates. They want to basically separate humans from animals. So an interaction with animals, whether it be as pets, as food, for clothing, hunting, guide dogs, anything at all, their aim is to separate humans from animals completely. And they've had kind of free reign on the internet and on mainstream media for 15, 20 years. And they've been able to say what they like about us, spreading rumors and misinformation, disinformation, propaganda and lies that has formed a kind of narrative that makes reptile keepers and pet keepers look bad. And it's, on the whole, it's grossly unfair. Yes, there are a few problems that we generally have got to deal with, but on the whole, we don't deserve most of the problems that animal rights campaigners are causing. And while they've been online saying all this stuff about us, we've just been over here looking after our animals and not concerning ourselves with this. And it's reached such a degree now that unless we do something about this, we're going to endure animal bans and pet keeping bans. And in fact, it's already starting to happen in many countries. So we're addressing the situation in many different ways, and I'm sure we'll get round to those. But essentially, we're a media department that tells the truth about reptile keeping and animal keeping. And if that truth isn't a nice truth, then that's fair enough. We embrace that. There are certainly things that can be improved within our hobby, and we like to address that where we can. But surely we, on the whole, don't deserve most of the criticism we get. So it's our job to set the record straight. That's the short version. And which there's a lot more to it than that. How we actually got here is a big story in itself. But yeah.
But and that's quite interesting because I mean, when it comes to especially reptiles, I mean, I've been keeping reptiles for like in the region of about 30 years, and in that time, there's always been people very much against uh, what reptile keepers do, what exotic keepers do, and stuff. And it's always any kind of thing kind of against that's always been very much retaliatory to it, and kind of sometimes in the background.
Yeah, in the
And stuff.
background.
The your general everyday keeper perhaps didn't realize kind of thing that there was organizations like the Federation of British Herpetologists that were fighting
Yeah.
for shows and stuff. But a lot of keepers even today haven't heard of sort of thing.
And you know what? Oh my God, I remember those days when all I wanted to do and all I had to do was enjoy my reptile keeping. And
Yep.
um, and to be honest, that's really where keepers should focus. They shouldn't have to worry about all the politics and the bullshit that goes on in the news and in politics. They shouldn't have to. But the time has arrived when they need to pay at least some attention to that situation, because we can only we can only fight against the problem if we've got their support and if we've got their voices behind us. So yeah, you've hit upon a really interesting point there. You've raised a very interesting point that I wanted to cover at some point this evening, so I may as well cover it now. So you're right. 30 years ago, the pressure on us wasn't as bad as it is now, but it was certainly there. I mean, I've been working with reptiles for nearly 40 years, professionally for nearly 40 years, and the escalation in pressure and campaigning against keeping has increased. And what we've had in that time, and this is internationally as well, all over the world, this has been occurring. We've had organizations that have set up and worked their asses off in different countries to counter that misinformation coming from animal rights campaigners. So in the UK, we had REPTA, the Reptile and Exotic Pet Trade Association, that looked after traders and businesses. And then we had the Federation of British Herpetologists, whose interests were keepers, private keepers. In my mind, I think we're all one community. Even if you're just a
Yep.
keeper, you rely on the trade, and if you're a trade, you definitely rely on the keeper. So our interests are intertwined and almost inseparable. But regardless, around the world, there are lots of organizations like this that's their primary job is to lobby government, to interact with government, to work with policymakers, legislators, politicians, ministers, to make sure the shit doesn't hit the fan, so to speak. And the way that I describe them, and this is broadly true, is they're essentially firefighters. They're essentially superheroes. When ridiculous legislation is proposed, they put their pants on the outside and they put a cape on. They fly to the rescue, and they do a really, really good job. And not just a really, really good job; they do an essential job. Without them, we would all be in trouble. Yeah. And when I say they do a really, really good job, what I mean is, given the budgets that they work with, they punch above their weight considerably. So even the richest, I say richest, I don't mean they're not rich in in context terms, but US Arc bring in about $1 million a year, approximately. US Arc, if you don't know, is the United States Association of Reptile Keepers. They bring in about $1 million a year. They're probably the most accomplished. They're in the biggest economy in the world. Blah blah blah. So no wonder they're as big and as busy as they are. Um, just one of our opponents, World Animal Protection, and they're not even one of the biggest ones. Just one of our opponents, one year, a few years ago, last time I looked, they brought in about £32 million in a year. So our organizations that are fighting politically on our behalf are definitely punching above their weight. And the reason they're able to do that is that they don't rely on propaganda and bullshit and stupid, stupid scientific papers that aren't at all scientific.
Yep.
They rely on facts and evidence and research and knowledge and experience. And so that's how they manage to fight really hard. But that's only one way that we have to fight against misinformation. Another way, and something that we've been terribly remiss at, something that we haven't done very much, is conduct scientific research. or at least not the type of scientific research that results in a research paper that can be cited. We've just been getting on with it in our own collections. We've just been doing the do at the sharp end. Our research and our knowledge and experience has all been very practical and extremely effective, because if you think about it, where has all this scientific progress come from? Where has all the innovation, the husbandry progress, the welfare progress, the products that we use, the new protocols, the new initiatives? It's not scientists doing this. It's not even zoos doing this.
Like,
It's private keepers. So we are the pinnacle of knowledge for reptile keeping. So we've got the political sphere that we're fighting in, and we've also got the scientific sphere that we're fighting in. And the third thing that we now working at really hard, and this is what responsible reptile keeping do, is looking after the publicity, the news, and the PR and the media. Because as I say, we haven't really been looking after our image or how people perceive us, since the internet started. And our opponents have been very, very busy generating bullshit, recruiting support, recruiting funding, and then taking that into politics and into science and building bullshit there as well. So we really need to take the bull by the horns in that respect. And as communicators, that's why we did that. But yeah, it's a very complex situation that we're dealing with.
yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing of like, because I'm both private and zoo, at the same time and stuff. So, and I see, the stuff that goes against obviously zoos as well as private keepers, and so much of it is, where it might be photos that they put in grayscale and cut a load of stuff out and stuff, and it's it's just so easy to go, look how depressing this is, and it it's like, well, that there's no context there, kind of thing, and stuff. But people that don't realize that fall for it all the time, and it's easy to pull on the heartstrings that way, kind of thing, kind of misinformed in zoos. You see all the time with orangutans, kind of thing, like, look at this sad orangutan sitting there, it's not smiling. Well, no, they can't. Thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, what's good about that is, I mean, reptiles especially, and inverts even more and more so. Reptiles are becoming commonplace. Reptiles are becoming so familiar to people that, don't quote me on this because I haven't got my statistics with me, but I think they're the fourth most common pet in the country, or at least in the UK. Worldwide, it might be different, but certainly, I think everybody knows somebody who keeps reptiles now. And, I go to a zoo and I often think that, hey, that reptile store I was in the UK last week had a much better reptile collection. We do a really good job. And I think people are coming to realize that the animal rights campaigners are corrupting the truth in order to try to recruit gullible people. So,
yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, reptiles, I mean, and inverts both over the years seen a rise and rise and rise in popularity all the time. When I first
why
started,
is that?
I was the weird person. I was the weird snake person, the weird lizard person. Oh my god, you've got this and stuff. But reptiles, amphibians, invertebrates, LVI as it's called in zoos and stuff, they just suit modern day sort of lifestyles so much
Exactly.
better. So
Exactly.
you don't have to take them
Reptiles
for
are
a walk
popular
twice a
for a
day.
reason. Yeah, reptiles are popular for a reason, and that's because for a lot of people they make really, really good pets. And do you remember the card game Top Trumps?
Yep.
Okay, so Top Trumps, you used to compare different aspects of like cars. How many seats has it got? What's its horsepower? What's its top speed? If you played Top Trumps pets, and you had cats and dogs and rabbits and guinea pigs and fish and reptiles, I think reptiles would come out as the best winner because they're good in so many ways. So they don't come and wag their tail at you or purr at you, but in most other aspects they are a really, really good pet, and they are interactive and affectionate in other ways. And they just make such good pets for modern lifestyles, and that's why they're becoming most popular. You can't deny that. That's an undeniable fact.
No, absolutely. And I'm like, I mean, just on the invert side of things, like that's what I've got in my private collection nowadays. Is just inverts, just because of where I live. But I still work with reptiles, and my parents still have reptiles, and my partner has reptiles. So, you know, they're really shot up in popularity.
Oh man, it's surprised me. I have, as a through and through reptile guy, I am absolutely astounded by how popular inverts are. When I was starting in the late 80s, we had a handful of tarantulas. We had I think it was emperor scorpions and Madagascan hissing. Nice mug.
Yeah,
Madagascan hissing cockroaches were just about becoming a thing. Yeah.
yeah.
And you didn't really get many other inverts. And it wasn't until I went to visit Martin Hole at the pet factory in Germany. And
I'm
have you been there?
never been there, but
It's
I've always heard
astounding.
about it, and it sounds amazing.
It's astounding. We walked into this. Imagine I don't know, a room the size of a toilet on a train. Yeah. And I said, "What's in here?" And he said, £250,000 worth of cockroaches and stick insects. And I was like, "How? And, how do you?" But that's what it is. And do you know about the situation in Japan with beetles?
The beetle breeding over in Japan, Taiwan, and like it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Well, this shocked me when I found out about this. I wrote an article about it for one of the reptile magazines that I wrote for, and essentially in Japan, young teenagers, pre-teenagers, probably 11, 12, 13-year-olds, are given a beetle larvae as a pet when they reach that age. And the idea of it is that they have to look after and nurture and cultivate this beetle larvae until it metamorphosizes into a beetle. And when it does that, there's a big kind of coming of age celebration. They've learned responsibility and compassion and care and all of these worldly life skills that they need. And then as time goes by, they eventually learn how to deal with death as well, of course. Um, so the beetle thing is such a big part of their culture that you can walk into one of their normal neighborhood supermarkets like a Tesco or an Aldi, and
I'm so jealous
there's
of
a
that.
row of beetle products on the shelf. That's how popular it is. I would love for that to become a thing over here. Just an introduction to pet keeping and learning worldly life skills. What a fantastic idea.
Yeah, I I love my beetles, and I love like the giant beetles that take forever to grow and stuff.
Yeah.
And got to make all the flake soil and stuff. And I was speaking to like Japanese keepers and stuff, and even keepers that have come over to the UK now live in the UK, and they just make me jealous of like, oh yeah, they just used to go to their local supermarket and buy a massive bag of like
Yep.
the best flake soil going and
Ready
cheaper
mix
than what we
substrate.
can make
Yeah.
it and get it for here in the UK and stuff. And it's like,
Yep.
ah, that's how it
Yeah. It's just
and
such a
stuff.
massive part of their culture.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's
and so
fantastic. And that's, if we could do that over here, it'd be very pleasing. But
no, absolutely, and it's the kind of thing of like again going back to when I was a kid and first got into reptiles and stuff. Certainly my parents' friends, at that time were like, "Oh my god, why are you letting him get this for this that the other?" But then that kept me on the straight and narrow kind of
yeah.
thing because it became a passion, and then it
Yeah.
was like, I want to save my pocket money for my animal. I'm not, I don't
And
want to
you
go and
weren't
waste.
out there buying drugs and alcohol and
No,
yeah.
no,
Well,
or at
not all
least
the
not,
time, I assume.
to excess, or it's like actually, you know what? I'm not going to spend 150 quid on booze and get completely plastic because actually I need this light kind of thing.
Exactly.
So I
Exactly.
need to get a light from a lizard, or I need to do this and stuff.
Who
Um,
knows how wayward we'd be if it weren't for reptiles?
that's it. That's it. So, and yeah, certainly, yeah, these are their ages. Yeah, so much more accepted and stuff, and yeah, like I said, so many more people are like, oh yeah, I've got a leopard gecko. Oh yeah, I've got a beardy.
Well,
So,
we want to normalize reptile keeping and animal keeping in general, and this is why we run the My Reptile Pick initiative on social media on the first of every month. And it's again because of the pressure from animal rights campaigners who are campaigning to social media platforms to ask them to stop posting pictures of animals and so-called exotic animals, especially because they claim that it firstly is animal abuse if you're taking photographs of your animal, and secondly, they claim that it normalizes reptile keeping. Well, good. Let's do more of
Yeah.
that then. Let's normalize reptile keeping. Let's show people how much we love our animals, how much we care for them. Let's show them how animals are kept well. Let's show them how much they mean to us. Yeah. Let's show the best parts about reptile keeping so that more and more people see it and more people see it as acceptable rather than as some kind of weird or evil endeavor. Because we know it's not. We're keeping bloody crested geckos and derpy ball pythons, for God's sake. It's not like we're all keeping crocodiles and giant anacondas.
No, exactly.
But that's
And
what people imagine.
yeah, and there's that stereotype. I mean, I sort of fit into the stereotype, but like all these reptile keepers, with their long hair covered in tattoos and this, that, the other.
Which I actually was when I was.
I've got long hair. I've
um,
got a tattoo, and but like they put this narrative about like that with that sort of a bad thing on society and stuff, and it's like actually a whole bunch of scientists are like that.
exactly. But when I was young, there was a prevalence of kind of hairy-assed, heavy-rocking reptile keepers, of which I was admittedly one. But what transpired over the next few years was interesting, and I blame the state of reptile keeping today on women. Hear me out. Hear me out.
I know where
Right?
you're going with this, but yeah.
But so it used to be a bunch of hairy ass blokes in the back bedroom with wooden boxes, yeah. And it was very, very different from the fish keeping thing that happened in the living room. But when companies started to come out with really attractive enclosures, like glass enclosures and lots of naturalistic stuff inside it, instead of just a hide box, a water bowl, and a light bulb like it often was, when it started to become an attractive slice of the jungle, it got admitted to the front room, and without wanting to cast a broad brushstroke generalization, it was often the wife of the family who decided what was suitable to be in the front room and what wasn't. And so as soon as reptiles and reptile keeping became acceptable by the mainstream and became a beautiful thing to have in the living room, lots more women became involved. And certainly the whole kind of 80s and 90s, if a woman turned up at a reptile society meeting or at a reptile show, she was a rarity. It was like, oh my God, it's an actual woman here doing reptile keeping. Now, in the last survey that the FBH did, I think it was 52% of keepers were women. Now, it might be that women are just more likely to fill out a survey than a bloke. I don't know. But certainly the balance has changed. And I think with that has become a spike in welfare and a spike in nurturing. I don't know. It correlates very strongly, but certainly I think we've got a lot to thank women for in reptile keeping today.
Absolutely, and it's doing nice glass black framed enclosures that look
Yeah,
like a piece of
looks lovely.
furniture and stuff, and it's
Yeah.
that thing of like, yes, I want to display this. So then, as a bit like the aquatics thing of people would love to have a nice, beautiful planted fish tank in their room.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I've said for years, like in terms of reptile keeping, we're always almost following the aquatics trade and especially marine trade.
Yeah.
Thing,
Yeah,
and
largely
what
it is
marine
true.
keepers do and stuff. With their technology and some of the price, some of the things they pay and what they go into detail, it's like, oh my god, thing.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
And stuff, but it's like amazing stuff that aquatic keepers, specialists are doing and stuff, and it's like, yeah, it's then undeniable to me that then someone who doesn't get can look at that and go, that's stunning, that's beautiful, sort of thing. I get
The
it.
normalization of reptile keeping needs to continue. And like I say, it's a big part of why we do my reptile pick on the first of each month. So if you're listening, if you're watching, what I'd like you to do is grab a pen and a piece of paper, because there's several really easy things you can do to get involved with what we do and help out and help to spread the message and help to care for reptile keeping. And the first one of those is to take part in my reptile pick. And all you have to do on the first of each month is take a selfie with you and your reptile. Some people don't put themselves in the pic, but you really should, because it's, you know, it's about reptile keeping. So take a selfie of you and your lovely reptile, um, put it on your timeline, hashtag my reptile pic, tag responsible reptile keeping, and yeah, that's, I think it's great to fill the internet with cool reptiles on the first of each month. So, you know, we have the ability in this country to keep pretty much anything we like. There's countries out there with reptile bans and positive lists that can't keep these animals. And I'll tell you what, they really relish seeing our animals. They really relish seeing what we can keep. Um, just before we came on air, we were talking about filming some videos with the Norwegians at Monkfield Reptile. And while we were there, we had a look around their reptile house. And the Norwegians were almost in tears at the animals that they were able to see and interact with, because they're only allowed to keep 19 species, believe it or not.
Yeah. And that, I mean, that's something I was saying I want to sort of chat about in terms of positive lists and what a positive list is, especially for people that perhaps haven't heard of them, or because it's called positive, think, oh, it must be a good thing, when it's definitely not.
Yeah, definitely not. So where do I start with positive list? It's my favorite stroke least favorite, favorite stroke least favorite topic. What I ought to do before we start to talk specifically about positive lists is explain the different ways that animal rights campaigners attack us. Yeah. So animal rights campaigners attack us in a few different ways. They say that reptiles are difficult to keep and that they all die and are difficult to care for. One of the things that they say is that 75% of pet reptiles die in the first year. So you and I instinctively know that that's bullshit, right? We kind of just instinctively know it. But you know, there was a scientific report out there that said 75% die. So we looked into it, and it turns out that that scientific report was, surprise, surprise, bullshit. What they did was the researchers counted all of the animals that came into the UK, were imported into the UK, and used that number. What they didn't do is subtract the animals that flew out again on a connecting flight because they were in transit. I mean, the UK and Heathrow is a hub, is a cargo and airline
Yep.
hub. So animals came in and they used that massive number. So they overestimated the number of animals coming into the UK. What they also did was they underestimated the amount of reptiles that are alive and well in the UK. And what they did, how they did this was they took a bit of research that was conducted by the Pet Food Manufacturers Association. They're called Pet Food UK now. But what the Pet Food Manufacturers Association do is they call up thousands of households every year, and they say, "Hi, do you keep pets? Do you keep birds? Do you keep rabbits? Do you keep rats? Do you keep guinea pigs? Do you keep fish? Do you keep reptiles?" And if you answer yes, they assume that you keep an average of 1.6 of those animals, which if you keep a dog is about right. Because if you keep a dog, you've probably only got one. Some people have two, and very few people have more. And the same for a cat. You've probably only got one. Some people have two, very few people keep more. So 1.6 is about right. If you answer yes, you've probably got 1.6 cats. If you answer yes to reptiles or inverts, the odds are that you've got more than one. You've probably got more than one. So 1.6 reptiles, if you answer yes, doesn't really work for reptiles. And we know this. And even the Pet Food Manufacturers Association know this. But you know, that's the way they do their research. They know their methodology doesn't work well for reptiles, but it's a rough guide. What we have got is the Federation of British Herpetologists, who estimated that originally their estimate was 8.8 million reptiles in the UK, but they've adjusted a little bit now. And given the way averages work, they reckon it could be anywhere between 4 million or up to 12 million. So 8.8 is it's a rough stab in the dark, but it's about right. So this 75% statistic came from overestimating the number that came in, underestimating the number that were alive and well. Oh my God, they must all be dead. 75% of them must die then. So we know it's bullshit, and it is bullshit. We've even got two studies done by separate people, one of which was the Durrell Institute, yeah,
Yep.
and
Dice.
one of which is a friend of mine called Becky Clark, who's definitely as clever as the Durrell guy. She's just not as well known. But they did separate research studies on reptile mortality, and they came out with a different figure. And in fact, both of their figures were different. Becky's, I think, I'm sorry, Becky, if this isn't exactly right, but I think it was 3.25% die in the first year. And the Durrell Institute's number was different again. It was 3.6% die in the first year. So very, very similar figures done by completely separate people who conducted real research and found out that it wasn't 75%, it's 3.54%, So we know that their welfare accusations are largely bullshit. Does bad welfare exist? Yes, it does. And many people are doing as much as they can about that. Can we eradicate it completely? I would say probably not, but we're gonna, try hard or die trying is what we're all about. Every animal keeper I know is the same. So welfare, we're not doing too bad. And compared with other animals, we perform pretty bloody well, I can tell you. Yeah. So the next thing they attack us with is conservation. They say that all of our animals are stolen from the wild. So how many of, I don't know, your bright pink ball pythons are stolen from the wild? How many of these color morphs of corn snake? They're not. We asked Monkfield and Peregrine, the two major UK wholesalers, about their livestock, and on any given day in any given month, you can say that about 5% of their livestock is wild caught. Yeah. So 95% of it is captive bred. And we thought that was pretty good until we spoke to all the stores. And it turns out that the stores hardly buy any of their livestock from Monkfield or Peregrine, from the wholesalers. They buy them from captive breeders, local to them. So
Yep.
the number of wild caught animals in the UK is tiny. Yeah. So the idea that they're all stolen from the wild and causing conservation issues is, again, total bullshit and exaggerated. Yeah. They also say that these animals are going to become invasive. Carpet pythons becoming invasive in Doncaster and things like that.
Yep, that classic.
It's not going to happen. But they exaggerate it. They use examples from Florida as ammunition. But in the UK, we don't have any reptile invasive species. We have Escalopian snakes, and there's two populations of Escalopian snakes. One of them is, by coincidence, don't know how it got there, just outside Welsh Mountain Zoo. And one of them, by other coincidence, and we still don't know how this one got there either, is just outside London Zoo. Yeah, don't know how they got there. But anyway, those are the two populations, and those two populations are contained and they can't spread. And one of the things you have to do if you want to be invasive is expand your range and become economically and environmentally damaging, so damaging to the ecology. And those two populations can't do that. So they're not invasive, they're what we call non-native. We've also got Trichemis turtles, the red ears and the maps and the yellow-bellied sliders and that. We've also got those, but we're pretty sure they're not breeding. And I think there's tests going on now to see if they can breed in the UK. But even if they do breed, the temperatures aren't enough to produce both sexes, because turtles are sex-dependent, temperature-dependent sexing.
Yep.
And if we ever get to the point in the UK where global warming has heated us up to the point where we can hatch both sexes of turtle, we've got bigger problems and things to worry about than turtles. Yeah. So again, invasive species across most of Europe is a tiny problem. I spoke to Helen Roy, who produced probably the world's leading bit of research on invasive species for an organization called IPEBS. And there was hardly any mention of pet trade, pet keeping at all. And the problems that she explained when I was speaking to her was that in some areas with some species, yes, there is a problem and we need to take care. But you know what? In most places and most species, there's not really an issue. Some things are a problem and we should be considerate. Are there small issues? Yes. let's deal with them. So they attack us on welfare. They attack us on conservation. Both of those are bullshit. And then they attack us on human health. They say that all of your animals are going to eat your children,
Yep.
and you're going to catch the next COVID pandemic from your,
Yep.
leopard gecko.
Some of the things I've heard in my time have been extraordinary. Again,
It is.
Back when there was more sort of clubs and societies, and when I first started, I was a member of the Eastern Herbological Society in Norwich and stuff. Even though that was a good hour's drive, that's where that was our nearest one, so that's where we went and stuff.
Good.
And there was a thing where they used to hold shows, and was in one of the schools in Norwich, and new governors, came in, and of course animal rights were, and then got to go, if you hold a show for the next year to 2 years, anyone that goes in that room will instantly get salmonella. And he's like,
let me tell
that.
Well, let me tell you about something that happened. It's a good few years ago now, but one of the animal rights organizations offered legal representation to anybody who could prove that they'd caught salmonella at a reptile show. Do you know how many takers they got for that?
Absolutely no one.
Zero. Because we all know that if you wash your hands, you'll be okay. It's not rocket science. You're more likely to catch salmonella from your lettuce. In fact, there was an outbreak of salmonella on salads.
Salmonella from cucumbers and
even the vegans aren't safe.
Sort of thing. So it's like, are we going to ban cucumber? No.
Yeah, and this is it. So, can you catch salmonella from your reptiles? Yeah, if you're stupid, and can you get bitten by your animals? Yeah, but it's probably not going to hurt. And if you get bitten by your crocodile or your Burmese python or whatever, then that's on you, really. And our job as keepers is much the same as our job as motorcyclists or airline pilots. It's to keep everybody safe. And that's what the Dangerous Wild Animals Act does. The Dangerous Wild Animals Act is the most amazing piece of legislation. Excuse me. As far as I know, it's the only piece of legislation in the whole world of any type at all that's been 100% effective, because its job is to keep the general public safe. And in the time since it was launched, I think 1976, there has not been one single episode of any member of the general public being harmed by their animals. So I'm pretty sure that reptiles aren't a dangerous pet. Do you know what's the most dangerous animal you can keep? And I say a kept animal on purpose, and I use that phraseology, kept animal, as a bit of a clue. What's the most dangerous animal you can keep?
So, doing kept, I would go probably.
And I say kept as opposed to pet.
Some people have as pets, but some don't. Some have as working animals. I would say horse.
Very close. Very close.
Oh.
The most dangerous kept animal, if you're in America and if you work on a ranch, is cattle. That's the animal that
going to be my
most...
I was torn between horse or cows.
Yeah, but that's a professional kind of risk at work. If you're talking about pets that people keep as a companion, then a horse, because whatever a horse does to mess you up is going to mess you up pretty badly. If it bites you, if it headbutts you, if it knocks you off, if it treads on your foot, whatever happens is going to be bad. And after that, you've got, of course, dogs and cats. What's the safest pet you can keep?
I do know one, but I wonder if the chat knows the safest.
Yeah, let's have a word with the chat. What's the safest what's the safest pet animal you can keep?
So, which, if they need a clue, I'll say they're wet.
That's not a clue. That's a giveaway. You're right, though. It's fish. Obviously, fish are the safest pet you can keep. But even pet fish aren't entirely safe. I'm going to find you a picture on my phone, and hopefully you'll be able to see it if I flash it at you. There's some really unpleasant diseases that you can get from.
Let's just put it on big screen. There, look at that. Gnarly.
You can get some really nasty diseases from fish. This is from obviously some kind of infection you get from the water. So fish aren't completely safe, but they are the safest pet you can keep. And second in line is reptiles.
Yeah,
Reptiles are the second safest animal you keep, according to some research that was done by the NHS, where they had to record every incidence of somebody going to the hospital that was caused by an animal. So any animal related injury, and some of the reptile ones were quite funny in the year that I found it. So one of them was a lady who was in her garden using scissors to clip grass that she was going to feed to her locusts, and the locusts were obviously for her lizards. But when she was clipping the grass, she cut her finger, and because she went to hospital, that was classed as a reptile-related injury. Yeah,
yep,
so that was the first one. Another one was a guy who was in his garden, thought he saw a snake, turned and ran, trod on a rake, which hit him in the face, and that was classed as a reptile-related injury as well. So, fish, they're pretty safe. Reptiles, they're pretty safe. So, all of the accusations they say about human safety, you're going to catch diseases or it's going to eat you alive, it's just bullshit. So, these are all the bits of bullshit that are propagandized and lied about to try to ban reptile keeping. But this is my roundabout way of coming back to positive lists, which is where your question started. Positive lists are sold as a panacea, as a cure-all for all of the problems that reptiles create. Because what a positive list does is it bans almost every species of reptile from being kept. So I'll explain what a positive list is. A positive list is also sometimes known as a white list, and a white list is the opposite of a blacklist. So we all know that a blacklist is a list of things that are not allowed. So a white list is a list of things that are allowed. A positive list, a white list of animals, is a very short list of animals that you're allowed. Uh, Various countries have them. At the moment, Norway's got one, and you're allowed to keep 19 species of reptile in Norway. And there's some pretty
yep,
weird species on that list, but we'll come back to that. So the way a positive list works as a deterrent, and the way it's sold to government, is that if you can't keep an animal, then you can't keep it badly. So welfare is not a problem. If you can't keep an animal, then you're not going to steal it from the wild and it's never going to become invasive. So that can't be a problem. If you
yep.
can't keep an animal, then it
Is
can't eat your children and you
and
can't catch a disease from it. So that's what a positive list is. And that's how it's sold to governments as a panacea for all the ills of reptile keeping. And to the untrained eye, it might sound like a good thing. But if you'll allow me, I'd like to go into some of the reasons why positive lists are an absolute out and out nightmare.
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, fire me up because this is my favorite topic. Um, so, firstly, positive lists are absolutely unnecessary. And what I mean by that is, firstly, all of the problems that they profess to cure are such small problems that, proportionally speaking, it would be significant overreach. It would be like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. And there are much more effective ways of addressing those issues using education than legislation. It's already been proved that education is a much better way than overreaching legislation. I'll come back to that. But it's also unnecessary because there are already laws in place to protect us against all of those problems, to solve those problems. There's already laws in place to stop you being cruel to animals. There's laws in place to govern importation and conservation and laws about invasive species. There's already laws in place about making sure your pet doesn't harm anyone else. There's laws that are already there. And if anybody's to tell me that those laws aren't working, that's a debate we can have. With reptiles, I'm pretty sure they are working pretty well. Dogs and cats, maybe not. But if we feel like these laws aren't working, maybe they need better enforcement. What we don't need is another layer of law that isn't going to work either. And we know that they don't work. Because the second point why I hate positive lists is because positive lists are unenforceable. This has been absolutely proven. Um, in Norway, there was an out and out reptile ban for, between 1977 and 2017. In that time, a government survey, a government report investigation found there were at least 100,000 reptiles being kept in Norway. There was a thriving commerce and economy of
Yep.
shops selling all the stuff that you needed for it. In Sweden, they had a reptile ban at the same time, but when Sweden joined the EU, they had to get rid of the reptile ban because of EU law and free trading across different states. And all of a sudden, in Sweden, there were thousands and thousands of people and reptiles being kept as if by
Yeah.
magic overnight. Yeah. So we know that they don't work. And the problem with it is that if you can't keep a reptile, then I wouldn't be able to come on here and ask you about how to keep my animal because it's illegal. We might get into trouble for that. I wouldn't be able to go to a reptile society and find out about my animal because it's illegal. I might get in trouble. And worst of all, you can't take your reptile to the vet because it's illegal and you might get in trouble for that. So it actually harms reptile welfare. And while we're at it, we know all these animals are kept illegally. So therefore, they must be smuggled. They must be illegally traded. So by introducing a positive list, you basically guarantee an increase in illegal trade. And I'm still trying to find a good reason for a positive list, and I cannot find one. And I have no idea why governments take them on beyond pressure from animal rights campaigners. And I think that is the entire motivation, or what's the word? It's the entire reason why they do it, because of pressure. It's exactly what happened in Spain with the ball python ban, which is a very interesting topic. But positive lists, I'd love somebody to ask some questions about positive lists because I could go on about those all night.
Craig has asked about whether it'd be likely to come in for things like tarantulas.
If you'd have asked me 5 or 10 years ago, I'd have said no. Ask me today, and I'm like, maybe. And the reason I say that is because invertebrates are becoming increasingly in focus for animal rights campaigners. There's a convention each year for invertebrates. I can't remember where it is, but the Euro Group for Animals, who's one of the major animal rights campaigners across Europe, were campaigning there to recognize invertebrate sentience.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, invertebrates have never had any animal welfare regulations for good reason. We might love our invertebrates, but we still need to be able to swat a fly, kill a mosquito, spray a field. Yeah. And that's why there has never been any invertebrate welfare. Now, as invertebrate keepers, and I say this as somebody who used to breed live food for a living, I used to treat all of the live food just like I treated my reptiles, just like I treated my dog. There was no need whatsoever for any kind of poor care or cruelty. I always felt like I had a compassionate responsibility towards them, and I would assume that you guys do too. My experience of keeping them as pets is very limited, but I've seen invertebrate keepers. You're just as soppy and daft about your animals as we are, you know? So
Absolutely.
while there is no legal welfare requirement, animal keepers and pet keepers will almost invariably display good welfare. Yeah. So, there's every reason to think that the laws that are being proposed for reptile keeping and pet keeping could become a problem for invertebrate keepers. And indeed, it might even be more of a problem because fewer people are sympathetic towards invertebrates than they are to reptiles. Reptiles are becoming a bit normal, so people can kind of smell the bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah.
But whereas invertebrate keepers are concerned, you're still a bit freaky weird. You're still a bit on the peripherals.
Yeah, the invertebrates are now the weirdos kind of thing.
You are.
It's, oh my god, you've got tarantulas. Like, oh my god.
Yeah.
And then everything like tarantulas and scorpions, it's very quick to be like, oh, they've got all these highly
poisonous
venomous
scorpions.
Yeah, highly venomous and highly poisonous animals that they might kill your dog or kill your cat, and it's like no, it's unless they're DWA ones and kind of thing. It's
who was it who asked about tarantulas coming under scope?
Craig.
Honestly, Craig, it really does concern me that that's on the agenda. It's becoming increasingly prolific in the conversations. So it's something that we all need to be concerned about. And I'm going to tell you what the end of this podcast sounds like right now. I'll tell you what the finishing shot for this podcast was about to be right now because you brought it up. The finishing shot is that we all need to work together. The finishing shot is that it doesn't matter what you keep. It might be a fluffy rabbit, it might be a bird, it might, could be anything. They're coming after you. They're they
Yep.
they're not just interested in weirdos like me and you. They're interested in stopping all animals from being kept. The head of PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, said that the sooner we can dispense with this concept of pet ownership, the better, which absolutely drops my jaw. She also said that she initiated the phrase "better dead than bred." She's happy. She's happy for these animals to be euthanized or go extinct than for them to be kept by keepers. So they're coming for us all, and we all need to work together. I think Phil's frozen. I'm not sure if anybody else can hear me, but this happened before and he jumped out and then came back in again. Um, can is Phil frozen or am I frozen? Apparently, I'm still moving, but Phil is frozen. So I'm just going to carry on about positive list while he comes back in. Um, this happened earlier. I'm just scrolling down to see who's commented about it. Anyway, he'll come back in, I'm sure. Oh, there he is. He's gone and coming back in. Positive lists are probably the biggest risk that we face as animal keepers. It's high on the agenda all across Europe, and there's positive lists in place in several different countries. Like I say, Norway has a positive list, 19 species. The positive list in the Netherlands is just for mammals, and they just introduced it. And one interesting story from there is that Russian hamsters are banned, whereas Chinese hamsters are allowed. Now, if you're anything like me, you won't know the difference between a Chinese hamster and a Russian hamster. I just kept talking, Phil, and I'm still
Sorry about
going.
that. Yeah,
So,
my Wi-Fi just decided to restart itself again.
yeah, I don't think this technology is going to catch on. But I was talking about the positive list in the Netherlands, where they've got a mammals positive list. And on that positive list, Chinese hamsters are allowed, but Russian hamsters are not allowed. Now, me personally, I couldn't tell you the difference between them. And it seems that neither can the government, because on the government website where they've got the thing saying you cannot keep these animals, these are Russian hamsters, they've actually got a photograph of a Chinese hamster, according to my hamster colleague in the Netherlands. And also interestingly, the lady who breeds the most hamsters or Russian hamsters in the Netherlands, when the ban was brought in, somehow, and I don't know how, overnight she got rid of all of her Russian hamsters, and now she has a big colony of Chinese hamsters. I don't know how she did it, but that's what she's done. What I think has actually happened is that none of us can tell the bloody difference. Yeah. And this is one of the other reasons why positive lists are unenforceable. Who's going to come round your house and look at your collection of animals and say, right, that's not allowed, that is, and that's not allowed, that is? How many people do you know that could look through your collection or any reptile shop? I think I would be hard pressed to name every species that's in trade. We know that there are at least 1,400 species of reptile and amphibian kept in the UK. That's just the UK over the last few years. I don't think I can name them all.
No.
And I've been doing this a while. And that's before we start looking at inverts. So positive lists are about as useful as a chocolate teapot.
Absolutely. These are a good one.
I think I did.
Would the positive list affect educational keepers? So people with AALs doing educational displays and talks and stuff.
Yep, absolutely. If they're banned, they're banned. You might get, and in fact, you probably would get what they call grandfather rights. So if you own an animal that isn't on the positive list, that is essentially banned and no longer allowed, you're usually, but not always, usually allowed to keep it until it dies. You're not allowed to sell it. You're not allowed to breed it. You're not allowed to transport it. Yeah. And when it dies, even though you might think leopard geckos or bearded dragons or, Nile crocodiles are your favorite animal, the one that you love the best, the one that you always want to keep, you won't be able to replace it. You can't get another one. So they affect everybody. I think there are some very rare occasions for establishments being able to get exemptions. That's what happens in Norway. There's a reptile zoo in Norway, which quite frankly isn't much better than the average pets at home collection, but it's a reptile zoo. Um, it's a very basic collection of stuff that we've all seen before. But they've got an exemption from the Norwegian positive list, but it's very rare. In
Yeah,
the presentation we were talking about earlier, where that guy from Eurogroup for Animals was talking to the European Parliament about positive lists. Um, if you haven't seen that video, it's on our website. We do a rebuttal of it. So this guy from Eurogroup for Animals basically spouts a load of crap, and then I come along next to him like this in a split screen and say, actually, that was a load of crap, and give you the facts. So that's worth seeing. But one of the things he says is that a positive list would mean that only the people who are knowledgeable and experienced and wealthy enough to keep them should be allowed to keep them. And that will be very, very few. The words came out of his mouth. That will be very, very few people. That's what they're aiming at with this.
yeah,
Craziness.
and the thing, it wouldn't, and it doesn't even make sense because it wouldn't be the wealthiest anyway, sort of thing. And
well, you say that, but in Sweden, very recently, and when I say recently, I mean a couple of weeks ago, a proposal came out to change their welfare legislation, to change their animal keeping legislation. And they consulted with specialists from everywhere. They consulted with veterinarians, specialist veterinarians. They consulted with reptile societies. They consulted with animal advocacy organizations. And at the end of all these consultations, they completely ignored everything the animal keepers had got to say and just wrote their own proposal. And in this proposal, they said that firstly, you couldn't feed live insects to your reptiles, to your animals. Secondly, that you couldn't disturb your nocturnal species during the night. So you wouldn't have been able to care for your leopard gecko or, anything like that during the daytime. But the other thing was that the enclosure sizes that they recommended were so large that most people wouldn't have the space or the money to keep them. And so what that did, that took animals out of the hands of ordinary people and made it something that only very rich people could do, who had all the space and all the facilities that these ridiculous legislations recommended. It was an absolute joke. Thankfully, we killed that. And I say we, it wasn't really us. It was largely the Swedish associations who created such an uproar that the Swedish government had thousands upon thousands of contacts from email and telephone and letters telling them how ridiculous it was. And within 2 weeks, they withdrew it with their tail between their legs. And this is something that we need to learn. We need to get angry about this kind of stuff. I'm very surprised that, in fact, let me put it a different way. If we get a positive list, and there's every possibility that we will, then I'm afraid to say that we do perhaps deserve it. And the reason we perhaps deserve it is because keepers just simply aren't getting angry enough about it. Every keeper should be pissed off about this and angry because they want to take your animals away from you completely unfairly. And if we don't do something about it, if we don't kick ass, we will have this problem. It happened in Spain. And there's even a positive list being recommended for the whole of Europe. We were part of an EU Commission stakeholder survey that talked about positive lists in Europe. Some of your guys might have seen the survey that we were circulating last year. And the survey was an absolute nightmare to fill in. It took us about 2 hours and it was really difficult, but we had to do it because that's what we need to do to stop it coming in. We really, really need people to get pissed off about positive lists. If there's one thing that I want you to write in big red letters somewhere, is that we need to kick ass about positive lists. Seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she doesn't trust government to be able to put in place a positive list when they can't even get AL correct and standardized.
Damn right. Everything that the government has ever tried to regulate has largely turned into a shit show. And that's because they don't know what they're doing in most cases. Who knows best about animal keeping? It's us. Do you know why the AAL is such a shit show?
Oh,
It's an
there's so many
interesting story.
reasons. There's so many reasons.
Well, so the AAL, for anybody who doesn't know, is the Animal Activities License. And if you do any business that involves animals, more or less, whether you're a stables or a dog groomer or a reptile store, an animal experience or whatever, um, you have to have a license. Now, when they were putting together the licensing aspects for the pet trade, an organization called the Pet Industry Federation was given the leading role, the chairman's role. But the Pet Industry Federation are basically a dog grooming organization. They don't know anything about the pet trade. Now, when it comes to reptiles, there's one organization that's been in the dealing with the reptile trade in Parliament for decades, and that's REPTA, the Reptile and Exotic Pet Trade Association. But instead of asking REPTA to do the guidelines for reptiles, PIF, the Pet Industry Federation, gave it to the RSPCA, who we know are absolute anti-reptile keeping.
Yep.
So the guidelines that the RSPCA came up with were an absolute nightmare and would have closed down the reptile trade. And it wasn't until Pets at Home took all their money and their lawyers to government and said, we will take you to court if you push this legislation through, that the government went, oh God, okay, we better change it then. They gave that legislation to a couple of reptile advocacy folk. It was Chris Newman, Jim Collins, and a handful of others. I think OARTA were involved as well, the Ornamental Aquatic
Yep.
Trade Association. And there were certainly some others, and I'm very sorry if I've forgotten you. And they had 11 days to pull it into shape. And all they had time to do was to stop the absolute worst of it happening. So the AAL that we're dealing with today is the best that could be done in 11 days, but it's a lot better than what would have happened if the RSPCA's version had come through. Now it came in 5 years ago, and there's just been a review, and the review was done through CASC, the Companion Animal Sector Council. They interviewed us all. We gave our feedback about the AAL, and then that was given to CASC. And the secretariat of CASC is a gentleman called Dave Perry. And Dave Perry is the most softly spoken, gentlemanly, sweet guy you could ever wish to meet. But you don't have to scratch the surface of his feedback too far to realize that it says, what an absolute flaming nightmare this is. And the report is given to government says you'd better change it quickly because it's an absolute pile of crap. So yeah, there's the AAL is a whole story in itself, but certainly it's it's an issue we need to be concerned with.
Yeah, absolutely. So James Bond, the ban in Trachemis kills him. He's personally against it. Which says like at the end of the tunnel. For it looks like it's going to get worse with talks of Sudanese being next.
How long have you got for me to talk about turtles? How much time have you got for me to talk about turtles? So I'm very much with Chris Newman when it comes to turtles, in that it's probably the biggest mistake the pet trade has ever made. So in the 80s and 90s, we were, and I say we because I worked there, we're bringing in these tiny little turtles about the size of a 50p piece, and then we sell them to people who would then grow them up until they were the size of a dinner plate. They'd start to stink and need expensive filters, and then they didn't want them anymore. And by the time the zoos were full of them, people were releasing them into the wild. So thankfully, the reptile trade got together and said, look, these turtles aren't a good idea. Maybe we shouldn't be selling trichemis. Maybe we should sell easier species like musk turtles. Maybe we should do that. So they stopped selling trichemis. Unfortunately, the fish trade said, oh, right, you guys aren't bringing in trichemis, so we'll bring them in then. So they carried on bringing in trichemis and carried on selling them. At that point, we were still part of the EU, and the EU turned around to us and says, oi, we told you about this. We told you to deal with it. You haven't dealt with it. Now they're banned. You can't breed them. You can't sell them. You can't transport them. You can't keep them. Yeah. And only licensed facilities could keep them. Here's where it gets shitty, because now some people have had their turtles for like 25 years. they're getting old, they're moving house, they need to move their turtle on. What can they do with that turtle? How many places are licensed to keep these turtles? I can tell you it's very, very few. Why? Because they're big, they're smelly, they're expensive, and you can't move them on again. So if I give you a turtle to look after, you've got to look after it for life. So nobody wants these turtles. If you take it to a vet or if you take it to the RSPCA, the only option they'll give you is to euthanize it. So let's imagine you've had this turtle for 25 years. You can't rehome it anywhere, and you've taken it to the RSPCA, and they tell you that they're going to kill it. What are you going to do with it?
Yeah, you don't
And
want that
chuck
to
it in the
happen. So
canal.
yeah,
So the legislation is actually causing animals to be released, and thankfully they can't breed here. But now, interestingly, while we're talking about Pseudemis, the fish, while the reptile trade hasn't sold big, trichemis and big turtles for a while, you'll see very, very few in the reptile trade. The fish trade are now bringing in Pseudemis, which is ridiculous because they're bigger and more likely to cause a problem. So that's the next issue we'll have. And it's interesting that they're an aquatic species, so it's the aquatic trade that is causing the problem. But guess who gets the blame? They're a reptile,
the
so the
reptile. So
reptile
yeah.
trade gets the blame. So did I do a little rant then? I think that was a little rant.
So John's got a really good one here. What do you think we could do to try and ensure freedom with the hobby and exotic community?
Oh, good question. Which way do you want me to approach that? So let me start with keep your house in order. Don't do stupid shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen the internet this week with that guy juggling ball pythons?
I was just about to say I saw that literally last night. I got back from me and
Oh
my name
my
was at
God.
a entomology fair. Yes, he got back, and then literally I just saw that one of my friends supposed to be like, "What the hell is this?" And I was like, "What? Who in their right mind does that? What the hell?" It's just
It makes me angry. And these are the people that are causing problems that come back to bite us on the bum. So,
it just gives ammunition.
yeah, the number one thing you can ensure your freedoms is to keep your house in order. Keep your house in order, because there are people looking for opportunities to bring you down. So keep your house in order. There's no excuse for it, as you're not living in the 80s and the 90s like I was when I started keeping reptiles. And although I kept reptiles pretty well for the day, for the era that it was, there's no excuse for it now. The information is everywhere. I had to beg, borrow, and steal information in the 80s and 90s. We didn't have the internet. Yeah. So now you can throw a rock in the nearest town and hit a reptile specialist. There's no excuse. So keep your house in order. What else can we do to ensure our freedoms? Unless you want to become a campaigner, unless you want to dedicate your life to it, like I have, then you should support the people who are looking out for your interests. We wish you didn't have to be interested in it at all. We wish that you would just enjoy your reptiles and be done. But somebody wants to come and take them away. So if you want somebody to stop them being taken away, you need to support the organizations that are protecting your animals. The other thing you can do, and this is probably the best tip I can give anybody today in terms of safeguarding themselves from legislation in the future, is to keep really robust records about your animals. And this is even animals that are just common in garden, nothingness, not regulated, not legislated against. Corn snakes and leopard geckos. There's been plenty of examples where when new legislation comes in. So let's imagine tomorrow legislation comes in about crested geckos. They've decided the crested geckos are CITES protected and blah blah blah. And you've now got to prove that your animals were legally obtained. How are you going to do it? Well, you're not, are you? Because you just bought it from a local shop. You didn't keep a receipt. You didn't think you needed. Well, I'm telling you now that you do. That you absolutely do. Keep every record. Keep every vet appointment. Keep every piece of paperwork and administration you can to prove where you got those animals from and they were legally obtained, because it will come to bite you on the bum. A friend of mine in Spain had £750,000 worth of reptiles seized because he'd owned them for 40 years, and the legislation had changed. The Spanish CITES administration decided to reinterpret the law and decided that he couldn't prove that they were legally owned, so they took them. They distributed them around different keepers in Spain, and most of them died. That's what's happening.
And they're just within the world of invertebrates, there's a very real sort of possibility of this happening with emperor scorpions.
Yeah.
Banding
Well, they used to be $5 20 years, 30 years ago.
Yeah, I remember picking up adults for a fiver. Sometimes a tenner, be like, oh, that's a bit steep, a tenner for an adult emperor. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And not the last show, but the show before that, the Barnsley show, Northern Image show. After we're there, they came to my stand. Was like, do you have anything that's CITES? Which I don't trade anything that's CITES. And he's like, I'm looking specifically for emperor scorpions. I was like, got none here. I've got an emperor scorpion, but I haven't bred them yet, sort of thing. I've only got the one.
Yeah.
And stuff, and they're specifically looking for emperors and stuff. And it's like, if they are CITES species, but if they end up being the case of paperwork needed, it's like, well, actually, how do I can I prove that it's a captive bred one?
Keep your paperwork.
And stuff.
There's two ways of doing it online. There's a platform that supports us, so we'll mention them first. They're called the Reptile Keeper. At the moment, I think it's an husbandry app where you just log all your husbandry protocols and events. I'm not entirely sure whether there's something like a record keeping arm of it, but if there is, we'd recommend that you use them. But there is certainly another one that's based in the Netherlands called Terrafile, and that's a really good facility where you can store all of the information about your animals. And then let's imagine I've got a Terrafile profile and you've got a Terrafile profile, and I sell you my king cobra. You also get all the backlog of paperwork and record keeping, so that you've got that paper trail, but it's all done digitally, which is of course better than keeping folded up receipts in a box under your bed.
Yep. So feels like most of us are trying to promote better keeping swimming upstream as social media seems to push and reward the bad behavior, which it absolutely does. See it all the time.
I wish you had a mic, Lou, because this is something that grinds my gears. It's been interesting for us because we're internet based. Yeah, our entire operation is essentially on the internet, I suppose, apart from our magazines, but even that's on the internet. But we quickly learned to discern between animal keepers who have an internet profile and influencers who happen to keep animals, and they're two different things. And there's some that do it really well. So like Snake Discovery in the States do it really well. They love their animals, they do well, and they've got a massive following.
Yeah, kids love Snake Discovery. At work, often if I'm doing a talk, kids will often be like, "Oh, I watch Snake Discovery." And so and
they're lovely people as well. They I've met them a few times in the States, and they're lovely, lovely people. I've been to their place and their zoo, which is spectacular, by the way. Go see. But they're really, really nice people. Very, very busy, but certainly they've helped us a few times. They've shared our survey, which has been very good, very nice of them. But certainly the influencer thing is a problem because it's very easy to create animal related clicks if you do stupid stuff, and stupid people win stupid prizes, unfortunately, but not often quick enough. With that guy juggling ball pythons, honestly, I can't. There's hatred deep in my heart for that kind of behavior, and it just gives us all a bad name.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
All we can do is show the good side of things. We have to be the counterbalance to that. And again, this is what my reptile pick's all about. This is what Lulabelle's doing with her endeavors. We have to show the good side of it, and there's far more of us, thankfully.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's and this, unfortunately, the people that will often watch that sort of stuff, they're not reptile keepers, or they're not invertebrate keepers, they're not animal keepers, but then they think that's what we are and that's what we do. and stuff. And
Exactly.
it's that thing where showing like that's not what we are. That's not what we do. We don't agree with that whatsoever.
Exactly.
And stuff like
Well,
no animal should be juggled. Sort of thing. Doesn't matter what the animal is. Like
doesn't
no,
even need saying, does it? You
no,
know,
exactly. That should be common
just
sense that you don't do that sort of thing.
yeah.
Um, and
Well,
so and show
hopefully
that
he'll get his. The way I look at it, and this is unfortunate, and I think Lulabelle uses a really interesting phraseology when she says that we're swimming upstream. I can see why she thinks that, but I use a different metaphor. I think the reptile trade and the reptile community, and this isn't my metaphor, by the way, I've nicked it off somebody else. The reptile trade and the reptile community is a bit like an oil tanker, and it moves very, very slowly, but generally in the right direction. Now, there's people like you guys who are on this podcast who are like the tugboats, and you're at the front pulling it in the right direction. Yeah. But there's also people at the back who act like anchors. And I didn't pronounce the W in that word, but they act like anchors holding the hobby back. And Mr. Juggling Ball Python is one of them. And sadly, I don't think there's much we can do about those guys. Sadly, I think the only thing we can do about it is wait for them to die. And I think that's how we get the oil tanker in the right direction. So we just have to keep doing what we're doing and demonstrating the good side of reptile keeping. And that's why we wanted, as an organization, to publish the truth and publish what we know to be the most common aspect of reptile keeping, which is good people doing good things.
yeah, I mean enjoying their animals responsibly and stuff, loving their
Mm,
animals and stuff, and getting what everyone wants from their pet animals. I
yeah.
think.
And we're not apologists for the bad part of the reptile hobby and the reptile trade. Yeah. We know that some people do stupid things. So we've produced videos. Um, There was one about obesity. Maybe don't feed your reptiles so much that they become obese. Yeah, don't
Yeah,
do that, because obesity is probably the biggest health issue affecting reptiles today, affecting all pets, but reptiles are obese. Why is that? Because feeding reptiles is interesting. It's one of the most interesting
yeah.
things reptiles do. You know,
It's
so
fun,
that's
it's
why we feed them.
interactive and stuff.
Yeah.
And also, I think sometimes when
So
something I say at work in my talks, so many people that perhaps don't keep reptiles don't realise actually sometimes how little food they actually require. They presume that my caimans must eat every single day, and they get surprised when I say actually I offer them food, maybe up to 3 times a week, sort of
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
And they're like, "Well, what?" I go, I was like,
and
"Well,
that's
they'll go
still
hungry without food and be
a
absolutely fine," sort of thing.
yeah, exactly.
Sort of thing. And they don't get it
It's
because we think very. I always think we think very mammalian because we are mammals. We need regular
yeah,
food.
3 times a
You
day.
know,
Yeah,
you know. We grow up with cats or dogs or dogs and stuff. They need regular food. So then,
yeah,
well, my reptile must need regular food,
yeah.
kind of thing. And
And
so then
back in the
regular is
day when we
every
first
single
kept
day or
them,
twice a day.
yeah.
So
But when we first kept reptiles, if it ate, that's good. Give it some more. You
yeah,
know. Um, but this is it. We use, as mammals, we used a vast amount of our calorific intake on producing our own body heat. And as
yeah,
we well know, our reptiles don't need to do that. So they don't need to eat as much. And increasingly, they'll go through periods of brumation, hibernation, and also estivation if they're in
yeah.
a really hot climate where they. Have you ever seen a wild bosque monitor um, in the
Oh,
summer?
boss monitors like they just the amount of obese captive ones is just
Yeah.
that I just
And the
yeah,
reason for this is because in the summer, a bosque monitor, if you found one in the wild, it looks like it's dying.
yeah,
Yeah, it's so thin. They don't eat from like 6 months to the next. Honestly, they look awful. Now, we simply couldn't and wouldn't want to replicate that in captivity. And the fact that they're so eager to eat outside that time is why they get obese. It's a very, it's a very common issue, but certainly it's something that we ought to be aware of. The other video we do is maybe don't release your animals into the wild. Maybe don't do that because that comes back to bite us on the bum. And we've even recommended that you don't snuggle kiss your animals because if it's been sliding through its own crap, you might catch salmonella like someone stupid would do. Don't do that.
yeah.
It's just we're not apologists for the bad parts of the trade or the mistakes that keepers make. But what we do try to do is let people know the best way of keeping things. We try to, and I'm not saying lead by example because people aren't watching us. They're watching our members. They're watching the content creators that we work with. They're watching the businesses that we work with to see how to do things well. And if somebody isn't performing very well, then hopefully by looking around them in our community, they'll learn. One thing we don't like to do is to flame anyone. We had an email today actually saying, "Oh, I know that you're associated with this person and this person doesn't keep their animals well." Now, we are not the reptile police, and neither do we want to be the reptile police. Neither are we resourced enough to be the reptile police, and neither do we even have the knowledge or ability to be the reptile police. Yeah. Um, So, if we did want to be the reptile police, whose standards would we enforce? Because if I did what you said was the right standard of reptile keeping, you can guarantee somebody else would come along and say, "Well, that's not right. You must do it this way instead." If you
Yep.
put 20 reptile keepers in a room and ask them for opinions, you'll get
You get
30
20 different
opinions.
opinions.
Yeah. So we can't be the reptile police. We will never turn round and flame anyone unless you're going to do something really, really stupid like juggling ball pythons. But certainly, what we would hope is that if you're part of our community, you will embrace what we stand for and embrace what our members stand for and embrace the kind of behaviors and husbandry and welfare standards that they advocate for. We don't want to kick anybody's ass, but certainly we'd like to demonstrate what you should be aiming for.
and and oftentimes, if you see someone that isn't doing right and you do try and kick their ass, well, chances are they're just not going to listen anyway because you're berating them. So it
Exactly.
doesn't actually improve anything, and then it just stresses
Exactly.
you out as well as them, and
Yeah.
nothing improves for the animal. Whereas if someone sees your example and they're like, oh, they do that, and oh, okay, maybe I'll try that. That would be
Yeah. And look what's happened over the last 30 years. That's exactly how reptile keeping has improved over the last 30 years. I want to, let me tell you something that's not exactly a secret, but it's not something I talk about very often. Is my early days in reptile keeping. Um, I worked for what was the largest reptile house in Europe at the time. We had like 10 to 20,000 animals there at different times in the year. We had all the really, really cool stuff that everybody wanted. So I was introduced to the reptile keepers from around the world who were the best of the best. Yeah. I had the world's greatest initiation into reptile keeping. So quite quickly, I grew this reputation as the reptile guy amongst my friends. And it's only recently stopped where I get phone calls in the middle of the night from somebody who's got a reptile problem. My wife was absolutely astounded when we first met that I'd get these phone calls at ungodly hours of people wanting reptile advice. But part of what would happen is I'd often get a call of somebody saying, "Look, this guy's keeping his reptiles, he's keeping it really badly. This is happening, that's happening." And because I was a specialist, because I had the knowledge, and because I felt very angry when people treated their reptiles badly, I would take it upon myself to go and save these reptiles. I've lost count of the number of times that I've relieved people of their reptiles because they were treating them abysmally. Yeah. And I won't go into too much detail, but you can imagine the kind of situations that incurred. And two things resulted from that. Firstly, I ended up with a large collection of really shit animals that I did not really want. Yeah. But secondly, I also made myself rather ill in my endeavors to save every reptile and to make sure that um, bad welfare didn't happen. It was a never ending task, and it was hurting me. I couldn't keep doing it. And what I realized was that I was much better working here and educating, yeah, than working here and mopping up the mess. It was much more effective to educate this way than it was to mop up the mess this way. And so that's kind of how I dedicated myself for the next sort of 30 odd years. And yes, there are welfare issues. Yes, I wish I could save every reptile. Yes, I think the people who treat their animals badly should suffer 1,000 deaths. But if we can help them in a way that makes them into good keepers, then that's a good thing. If I can't do that, then I hope they die quickly and leave us good ones to keep our animals properly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and that's the thing, yeah. And you see that kind of around the world and stuff. I mean, and it's just human nature that if you get sort of chastised or something, you get defensive and stuff, and that's no matter who you are. And so, and that's very in the private sector, happens in the zoo sector and stuff. I know
Yep.
good few years ago, um, there was a sort of conference for zoos, but over in sort of Southeast Asia, and a bunch of
Mm.
people from IAZA went over. One of them was our nutritionist at the time, and yeah, one of our directors was going and he was like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" And he was like, "Most was going to be the importance of giving that your animals water." And so, because there was a thing over there that if they change the water, they'll change the water in the morning, but if it got empty during the day or whatever, but they've had their water so it doesn't get filled up again, sort of thing. Whereas, like, but I'm not going to criticize because if you criticize, no one listens. It's just like,
Yep. Well,
do it gently of like, well, if it gets tipped over or they drink it or whatever, or just fill up again, sort of thing. Just do this
let me give
one
you a
little simple thing.
let, let me give you a what might be a controversial opinion, but I'm increasingly of the opinion that animal welfare isn't a science. There are things that you can measure scientifically that will indicate welfare, but welfare itself isn't a science, it's a philosophy. Yeah. And the reason
Yep,
I say this is because what I think is good welfare will be different to even what you think is good welfare. And we're pretty much
yep,
on the same page, I would guess. But there's certainly going to be differences in an opinion. And in November of last year, I was in Equatorial Guinea, which is one of the top 5 least visited countries in the world. And I won't go into it all now because it was horrific in many ways. But what I saw there changed me as a person. Yeah. What I saw there was unspeakable. And what I saw that was unspeakable was absolutely daily routine for those people. There was absolutely nothing wrong with what they were doing as far as they were concerned. Their concept of animal welfare was so different to mine, but what they were doing was fine by them.
yep,
Yeah. So what we're talking about is a philosophy. And what we do with legislation is we grab a broad consensus of what should be considered good welfare. And in some countries it's different. In Spain they have bullfighting, and that's absolutely fine by them. Not by me, but I'm not Spanish. Yeah. And in Equatorial Guinea they have a very different idea of what welfare is. What we have to do as a culture, as a country, is decide what is good welfare and agree upon that. What causes harm is when we start attacking each other over small details and start attacking each other being either holier than thou
yep,
or just trying to be doing a good thing, but it involves attacking someone else. We're largely on the same team. We're largely doing good work. We're largely, looking after our animals well. There's always nuance and conversations, but certainly, on the whole, reptile keepers in the UK do a good job, and indeed in
yeah,
the whole Western world.
yeah, absolutely. And it's that thing of like, yeah, just because someone's perhaps keeping bioactive, I don't even like the term bioactive myself. Really, I prefer to use life planted as a term. So
Yep.
doesn't mean that that's the pinnacle.
No,
So, because someone could have a pseudo naturalistic with paper and be just as good a welfare, sort of thing,
absolutely.
and stuff.
There's
And
levels and there's nuances,
yeah,
and there's lots of ways of thinking about it, but certainly I think that on the whole, I'm rather proud of reptile keepers in the UK, Europe, and America. On the whole, I'm rather proud of the industry because, on the whole, they do a bloody good job. And it does annoy me somewhat when people attack stores or traders. It does rather annoy me, because on the whole, they do a good job. Are there some bad actors? Yes, there are. But on the whole, they do a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Having just mentioned Spain, can you remind me at some point that I need to tell you about the Spanish ball python ban, because that's
well, shall we
important.
talk about that now? Sort of thing. Well, so first,
Always,
yeah,
yeah, I can.
the raw python ban, because that's a really interesting topic. The raw python ban over there.
So, so ball pythons are, as far as we can tell, the most popular pet snake in the world. And this comes from the data that we have from the USA and the data we have from the UK, which says that 40% of reptile keepers own a ball python. So they're not the most popular snake in the world because ball python keepers often have 30 or 50 of them, although that's true as well. 40% of reptile keepers have got a ball python. So that still makes them popular, whether you're doing it by keeper or by number of ball pythons, it's still the most popular. I was on a podcast, was it last night or the night before? I think it was the night before, with a guy in America who breeds hognose, and he reckons that the hognose snake is the most popular snake in the world, because ball pythons are illegal in China, and everybody in China keeps hognose apparently. We haven't got data about that yet, but I'll keep you posted. Um, but anyway, coming back to ball pythons, the most popular pet snake in the world. In 2016, I think it was, somebody in Spain, and we still don't know who it was, decided to do a risk assessment to find out if ball pythons could become invasive in Spain. You know, West African ball pythons, Mediterranean Spain. So instinctively, we know that that's not going to happen. But of course, they came out and just said that ball pythons could become invasive in Spain, which we realize is just craziness. And because everybody realized its craziness, everybody who knew anything about it just read the report, laughed at it, put it in the bottom drawer, and forgot about it. There it was, gone. Until I think it was 2019, when Spain had a new government. Somebody in the Spanish government who was an animal rights activist found this report and decided that because the report says ball pythons become invasive, that they were going to ban them overnight. And so that essentially happened. They banned ball pythons, boss monitors, and peninsula cooters on the same day. The most popular pet snake in the world. If you owned a ball python, you had to register it. Yeah. Guess how many people in Valencia, and it's only Valencia because that's where the Freedom of Information request was made. Guess how many people in Valencia declared their ball python and registered it?
Guessing very few.
7. 7. I think there were probably a few more ball pythons in Valencia than that, if I was to guess. But anyway, so they banned these ball pythons overnight, and the Valencia Herpetological Society was absolutely outraged, incensed by this. So they managed to raise a few €1,000, and they took this ruling to the Spanish Supreme Court. And when they were there, they produced some really awesome legislation and some really good expert witnesses, and they gave that um, ball python ban a real spanking in court. They really kicked ass. And at the end of it, everybody thought that the ruling would be overturned. But at the end of it, the judge says, I understand the science is rubbish. I understand that they probably can't become invasive. I understand that your science is much better, but we're going to keep the ball python ban anyway, just as a precaution. And most people believe that it was because they had so much pressure from animal rights campaigners that they had to be seen to be doing something. So what we know from this is that it doesn't matter if you're right. It doesn't even matter if you've got science on your side. The way that people form opinions now and the way politics is formed is through the court of public opinion. And if you can grasp and manipulate public opinion, you can grasp and manipulate science and politics. Yeah. And so if we don't look after public opinion, if we don't put our side of the story across, if we don't correct the myths that are being propagated by our opponents, we will lose the court of public opinion. And while we've got organizations like USARC and Reptile and all of the others doing really good work in court, They can't win everything, and their workload will become enormous. What our job is to correct those problems before they even arrive on the desk of USARC or Repta. Yeah, if we can correct the miscommunication, if we can correct the misinformation, if we can inform people enough so that they look at this bullshit and go, "Yeah, that sounds like bullshit," and they disregard it instead of sending it through a legislative process, then we'll be doing our job. But if we don't take control of the narrative, if we don't control what people think and believe about reptiles and reptile keeping, our opponents will hold that weapon, and they will use it against us. And this is why we can't just rely on politics. We have to be active in our own image.
Yeah,
That was definitely a little rant. That was definitely a little rant.
And that's it. And yeah, thinking about what you're posting on social media and how you're portraying yourself and your animals on social media,
Yeah,
and stuff, so that literally more and more, it's, I know these people, are passionate, they're responsible, they're educated, sort of thing, like with all the stuff that they're doing and stuff, and that it becomes a thing that the outside person looks and goes, okay, that's amazing. I'm not, oh my god, they're doing this kind of thing.
Exactly, normalizing it.
Yeah, and it's just basic common sense, in my opinion.
I mean, this is common sense from our position, because we're relatively knowledgeable, we're relatively informed. Yeah. The general public aren't. And if you've ever been to any of the government meetings that I've been to with civil servants at DEFRA, at non-native species, at CITES, some of them know a little bit about some animals sometimes, but there aren't any specialists there. And in fact, they're actually populated with people who've come out of university with degrees that kind of don't want animal keeping to be a thing. And that's what we're fighting against.
That's it. And it even comes down to like the language used and stuff, because like they'll use things like, dominion of animals and stuff, are dominion of them, and it's like, what do you want about? Sort of thing, like dominion.
On that note, here's an interesting thing for you. So we all know that spider royal pythons and enigma leopard geckos, jaguar carpet pythons, and several other morphs are pretty bad, and we shouldn't breed them. And it's pretty common now for nobody to want to breed those. Nobody want them. And that's largely a self-regulatory thing. The reptile trade actually leads the way in self-regulating, bad genes like that. Now, in Germany, this kind of issue was going through their courts, and in Germany they call it extreme breeding. And it's not just reptiles; it's birds with silly feathers that stop them from flying or seeing, fish with silly fins that stop them from swimming, and dogs with silly faces that stop them from breeding. All of these things that we know are probably a problem. And if there's one thing reptile keeping can learn from, conventional animals, it's that breeding animals that are going to be unhealthy is probably a bad idea. Silkback bearded dragons, let's not, eh? So we do pretty well at that. And what you were saying about language is interesting. So amongst animal circles, we call this extreme breeding, and everybody pretty much has the same view. If you breed an animal and it's unhealthy, don't do it. Yeah. But our opponents, guess what they call it? They call it torture breeding. It's just those little bits of language that change the landscape.
Yeah. And it straight away, it makes you think differently. It makes you go, oh my god.
Quick ban it. Yeah. And this is it. The video that we produced with ZZF in Germany is, it explains it a lot better. I think the video is only kind of, what is it? 3 minutes long, 3.5 minutes long, but it kind of explains it in a nutshell. And if you want to dig deeper, there's extra places you can go to find more information. So, we have to take control of the narrative. It's important that we engage with this. So
yeah, absolutely. And also, when we move on to the survey that you've been doing, the worldwide super survey. Because that's soon coming to an end, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're only just in time. Um, okay, so where do we start with the survey? So in the UK, we have a load of information and data. We have two separate surveys, and we have information from wholesalers, from stores. We have information from National Centre for Reptile Welfare. So in the UK, we have loads of data. We know how many animals are being kept, what species they are, where people are getting them from, what they keep them in, are they wild caught or captive bred, do they breed them, all of this kind of stuff. Yeah, we've got all of that information, but we're a international organization. So when we were making our content and we wanted to use data to prove a point, we would say in the UK we have this data, in the UK we know this about reptiles. But when we were making content for other countries, we looked around for the information and it largely didn't exist. Yeah. Um, the the problem was that little bits of data existed on their own, but there wasn't the comprehensive data that we had in the UK. So what we decided to do was to launch the worldwide reptile super survey so that we could harvest the same kind of data from all over the world. And it's been pretty successful. And the first thing to say is, what are we going to do with that data? Well, the first thing we're going to do with it is we're going to let any advocacy organization in the world have that data if they need it to give information and evidence to the governments that they're discussing reptile keeping with. So that's the first thing we'll do with it. The second thing we'll do with it is we'll obviously use it in our content. If we're making videos about a topic or a country, we'll have the data to work with. What are we not going to do with it? We're not going to share it. It's all absolutely anonymous. Nobody's going to come knocking on your door asking to see what animals you've got. It's absolutely completely anonymous. Yeah. Um, and what incentives are there for you to fill in the survey? Well, first of all, everybody who fills in the survey will get a free subscription to the RRK magazine digitally. So every time we produce a magazine, that'll be yours for free. The second reason to fill in the survey is because there are cash prizes. You could win $100, $300, or $500. So that's a really good reason to fill it in. But the most important reason to fill it in is because all of this information helps us to argue your case and to help us to protect reptile keeping and to give good, well reasoned, scientifically robust information and evidence to governments. It's one of the things I was saying earlier, that you don't have to dedicate your whole life to doing the job that we're doing. All you have to do is dip in and help out when we need your help. And this is one of those times that we need your help to fill in the survey. So it's a really easy survey to fill in. We've done a lot of work making it friction free and simple to do. If you've only got a couple of animals, it'll be less than the time it takes for you to drink a cup of coffee. If you've
Yeah.
got a few dozen animals, you might drink 2 cups, but it's dead easy to fill in.
Yeah. And yeah, I filled it in for my parents, mainly just because they probably would have been on, but I
It's
was like, I
easier.
can fill it in. And
Thank you.
it's super easy to fill in. And so for
Yeah.
all reptiles and amphibians, you don't need to know scientific names. If you don't know the scientific names, you just use the common name, which is fantastic.
All the names just
And,
pop up as you start
and it just pops
typing.
up. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
literally first bang, starts coming in and stuff. And yeah, it's a super easy survey to fill in. Yeah, and even with my parents have a lot of animals, it didn't take long to fill in at all. Really
Oh,
didn't.
that's good. Thank
Kind
you.
of thing I found.
Well, here's the thing, and here's where it gets tricky. So we really, really need as many respondents as we can get. So if all the people on this podcast fill it in, that's great. But what would be even better is if you guys shared it as well, because you guys know all the other bloody keepers that we need to fill it in. I can't call up every one of those keepers. I can't send a message to every one of those keepers as much as I'd like to. We just haven't got time. But if I can get you guys to just hit up all your buddies to fill it in, that increases the numbers we've get. And I have to admit, we've got a problem in the UK with UK respondents. The FBH, I think when they first did it, they got a couple of thousand respondents. And then every year they've done it, it's dropped off a little bit, as far as I know. So just less than 2,000. I don't think we've even hit 1,300 yet. and we've only got a week left to fill it in. And the reason this is, I think, is everybody's sick of the sight of surveys. Everybody in the UK has been filling in surveys for so long, they're sick of the sight of them. They probably filled it in last year and the year before as well, and it's becoming a pain in the ass. And I'm really sorry, it is a pain in the ass. I know it, but if you could fill it in anyway, that would be awesome. We really need as many UK respondents as we can get. Um, I can't say anything more than that, really. We need more than 1,200. And you've only got a week left, so it closes on the 14th. We've only got a week left before the survey closes.
And I think one way that people can help, even if they don't have any pet reptiles, is just to share it with everyone, because hopefully there's someone that out there that perhaps hasn't heard about it that just has a leopard gecko, which that's still important to
absolutely. I think that the risk that we have is that all the people we know are nerdy nerds. Yeah, all the people we know have got decent collections, but most of the people who keep reptiles are people who just have one leopard gecko, one bearded dragon, one corn snake, and it's really difficult for us to get hold of them. They don't listen to your podcast, they don't come on all the reptile social media, they just sit at home watching Friends and playing with their leopard gecko when they want to. We can't reach those, but you guys can. You guys really, really can.
I just put she filled out a survey and signed a petition back a few months ago and been sharing information ever since.
Thank you, Amy.
Fantastic. And yeah, we just thought losing our reptiles due to not having the stats is a bigger pain in the ass.
It is. It really is. And this is one of the problems that countries that don't have this kind of data or don't have this kind of representation really suffer from. So I was speaking to some guys in Argentina a couple of nights ago, and in order to keep reptiles there, you have to have a license. In order to breed reptiles, you have to have a different, more complicated license. And the government has no idea how many reptiles are being kept, what animals are being kept, where they're being gotten from. They have no idea. So they just legislate. If they have data, that's stuff we can use for the best. Unfortunately, we've only had 4 people from Argentina fill in our survey. And interestingly, there are only 4 people in Argentina with a license to keep reptiles.
No.
So that's where you head if we don't have this data.
Okay. I'm trying to get a really good question here. What positive advice can you give to new people to the hobby? And then also, what do exotics do for you? What do you get from it personally?
Oh, great advice can I give to new? That's 2 questions at least, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let me start with the first one. Great advice, and this is a question that I asked when I was at the last IHS Reptile show. We lined a load of people up. I think Lulabelle answered this question for us. I don't know if we broadcast it yet, but I think we did. We asked dozens of people, what advice do you give to new reptile keepers? And the best answer I got was from a friend of mine called Clem. And Clem runs a company that supports
Clem.
us. Out. You know Clem?
I know Clem.
Oh, good. Crazy Dutchman.
Yep.
They run a company called Snake Professional, and it's largely animal handling equipment, but they're really good folk. I've known Clem for probably 30 years. So I grabbed Clem as he was walking past, and I said, right, what advice can you give to new keepers? And he said the perfect answer. He said, find yourself a reptile Jedi. Find yourself somebody who really knows their stuff, and they'll solve most of your problems before they even become a problem. Yeah, it might be your local reptile store, it might be your local reptile society, it might be a guy that you know or you've met somewhere that really knows their stuff. Not some influencer that's been doing it 5 minutes who's got loads of clicks because they smile nicely at the camera. Looking for somebody who really knows about their animals, and they'll solve most of your problems for you. They'll point you in the right direction, and even if they don't know the answer, they'll know somebody who does. And that's the biggest when I was a kid, we had no internet. So where did we get our information from? There were three places. You subscribe to a reptile magazine and hope they publish something that's interesting to you. But it was always interesting to look through anyway. You buy a book and you hope that there's a couple of paragraphs on the animals that you keep. But the best way was to hook up with a reptile society or to get yourself known at the reptile store where there was usually a guy there who knew his stuff. Yeah. But that was the only places you could go. And knowledge was power. If you could get access to knowledge, if you could get access to information, you were sorted. That's not true today. Knowledge and information is everywhere. You just go on the internet and it's full of knowledge, full of information. The knack today is knowing how to discern the good stuff from the bullshit. So not many people know how to do that, and especially when it's a new topic that you don't know very well. But find a way to find somebody who really, really knows their stuff. Make friends with them, buy them a beer, whatever it takes, and that's the best advice I can give you, because that's how you propagate best practice. So, question 2, what do exotics do for me? Again, that's one that I'm not the best person to ask, but we have got a series of videos coming out that answer that question for people that we've interviewed. There's a gang of people in the UK that we interviewed at the IHS, and they're very short videos, but we've also got a videographer from America who's been making some mini documentaries. His name's Adler, and he's been interviewing people from America that have got collections and explaining what reptiles mean to them. I think we've released one of them already. It's called Working with the Misunderstood. And this is something that's been a really common theme in people that I've spoken to about why they keep reptiles. Is that, and in fact, this is one of the things that Lulabelle says, reminding me now, is that reptiles are really misunderstood, misrepresented, thought badly of. Yeah. And they seem to attract people who've suffered similar kind of perceptions. The weird and wonderful outcast people who probably wouldn't mix in normal society, who don't do the normal stuff, who like unusual things, and they find companionship in their animals, but they also find companionship in the people who keep the same things as them. And if it wasn't for other reptile keepers, if it wasn't for the animals, and if it wasn't for the community that we have, these people probably wouldn't be around people. The animals give them a really positive influence in their lives, and this is a really common thing that I've been experiencing. I was speaking to a guy in, where is he? He's in Slovakia, but he's a Dutch guy, and he's I don't know if he's autistic or ADHD, but he says there's a really strong correlation between people with um, neurological affections that really get into reptiles and really, really get into them and really, really engage with that community. And he reckons it's a massive thing. I wouldn't know. I'm not that clever, but that's what he says.
I mean, yeah, I would certainly see there's, or at least seems to be a correlation there and stuff. I mean, myself, I'm the happiest when I'm chatting, inverts or reptiles or things with someone, or
Yeah.
so often if someone's engaged and someone's interested, I'll just ramble for ages on the topic.
Damn right.
And I don't know, it's either that or music, and they're my two topics, kind of thing.
Exactly.
Like,
I'm not very good at many things, but I'm all right at reptiles. And if you want to talk reptiles, I'm all day.
Yeah, if someone mentions like, "Oh, what's this?" Boom, I'm off. Let's go. Let's chat about that and stuff. But when I chat about cars, no interest. Kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Weird and wonderful folks have got a gang together.
And so that's why, like, I love going to things like the AHH conference every year, and zoo conferences and stuff, because like, I get to nerd up with everyone. I get to do this and geek out, and and be kind of open and like, yes, I'm a geek of this thing.
This is it. You guys are the tugboats. The AHH conference, and you guys that go there, you're the tugboats at the very, very top triangle pinnacle of reptile keeping. And I will credit the AHH with a lot of the progress that the reptile community has made in the last 10 years or so, if that's how long they've been going. That's been a massive force for good to pull that tugboat.
Yeah, and like I think I've been to everyone bar the very first one. So the very first one I couldn't make, but otherwise I've been going to them all and just watched it grow and stuff. And it's always great because you go there and come back with new things I've learned and stuff. And it's like, right, let's try
It
and
is
implement this,
absolutely a
let's try and that
wonderful
and
facility.
stuff. You know, and stuff. And I'm just like, yeah, we need more things like that. And I go there and then I can then share it with, you know, other people and stuff. I mean, was the other year when I had Jonathan Howard, Beardy Vet, come over.
Yeah. Yeah.
The first time he'd done what was meant to be an hour talk on beardies ended up being like 2 hours long, sort of thing.
Yep.
And we was all just there
Good.
like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah.
and stuff.
And that's it. It
beardies.
guides the whole community, you know. And these, yeah, you like you say, beardies. Who cares? They've been around forever. Everybody's got one. We shouldn't need to know anymore. But the fact that we want to know, and the fact that that information is available and it can be used to progress.
Yeah, it was, yeah,
Who
absolutely
says
amazing.
that we can't keep these animals well? Who says their welfare is bad when we've got things like that happening?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. So, oh, it's gone. So, what sort of, oh, actually, who's actually asked what reptiles do you keep training?
Here's a good question. So, I better start at the beginning with this one. So, my initiation into the reptile hobby was when I was 15 years old. And like I say, I worked at Europe's largest reptile house. So we had tens of thousands of animals there at any one time. And if you include all the invertebrates, it would have been hundreds of thousands. So my job for the first 3 or 4 years was basically chief shit shoveler. That's what I did. But I was lucky to be able to hang out with all of the top reptile keepers from around the world. And so when my boss died, I could go anywhere I like to work with reptiles. And I've been lucky enough to be a sidekick to, you know, big reptile projects for, you know, 25 odd years. So worked at a couple of zoos in the Canaries. I've worked with big venomous collections. I've worked with big python collections. I've worked as live food breeding facilities. So I've kind of been around a little bit, been on a few decent expeditions to places where people ain't supposed to go. That's been quite interesting. But I don't know if you can see behind me, but you might have guessed that I live on a narrowboat, on a canal boat. So here on the old canal boat, there isn't any space for reptiles. And I've lived here for more or less 20 years. And for at least 15 of those years, haven't had any reptiles of my own. I've had reptiles when I ran a business with a friend of mine. I got to the point where I just got sick of the sight of reptile crap. Yeah. I enjoyed working with reptiles. I enjoyed seeing reptiles. I enjoyed writing about reptiles. I enjoyed going to find them in the wild, but I just got sick of the sight of reptile crap. Now, 20 years later, I really, really miss cleaning out reptiles. Yeah.
Yep.
I really miss, and I've been trying to persuade my wife that we could have some free range geckos or something in the boat. And then she said, yeah, but where would they poo? And I said, well, anywhere. And then apparently that was a no. so that's a no, but I'm still working on her. I reckon we could get a sugar glider, or I don't know, maybe a tegu. We had a dog the size of a tegu. We could have a tegu. She's just laughing at me now.
I mean,
So,
black and white
but I do miss it. I get most of my excitement now from visiting other people's collections. I've just come back from Sweden, which was absolutely fantastic. Went into a reptile store there that was about the size of a typical Aldi, like a B&Q or something. And it had maybe 20 enclosures, but each enclosure was like this massive zoo-size enclosure. And there was about 3 or 4 rows of them. And it was absolutely fantastic. It was the best reptile store I'd ever been. And I spent hours upon hours walking up and down there, just enjoying it. And I didn't have to clean out one poo, not one. Oh, apparently Vicky needs a parrot.
Yeah, apparently.
Lulabelle says you need a parrot. Yeah, she could be persuaded. When we have a break from work, she's always flicking through Instagram and TikTok, watching funny parrots. So she can be persuaded, I'm sure. Uh,
Oh, no.
but yeah, Equatorial Guinea was interesting. We enjoyed, we enjoyed some of it when we saw the animals. It's I do miss keeping them myself, but what I do find is that by enjoying everybody else's, I get to enjoy far more animals. So there's a friend of mine who runs a zoo in Gran Canaria. He's got Komodo dragons and Cuban crocodiles. And occasionally I go over there and see his animals. And occasionally he goes away on holiday and leaves me in charge of them. So these are good animal experiences. But yeah, I do miss keeping my own.
See. So, oh, what's sort of next on the horizon for RRK?
Everything and anything else. To be honest, there are so many things that we could do, should do. It just comes down to time and funding. Before I go, I'm going to ask people to join and become a member and help us with funding, but also with their support in sharing our stuff. The the first year of responsible reptile keeping was taken up by us just producing as much content as we possibly could to get our name out there and to show people that what we did was important, and we achieved that pretty well. The second year of responsible reptile keeping was finding a way for it to be financially viable, and we haven't achieved that yet. What we do still isn't financially viable. There is so much that we could do and should do. um, I'm here talking to you now. It's 10 o'clock. This isn't unusual. This is still part of my working day. We aren't yet funded enough to operate sustainably. That's changing gradually, but there are so many things that we could be doing and should be doing that we really need to increase our funding so that we can address these issues and recruit more staff to help us. Our staff is essentially myself and my wife, Vicky. Um, Vicky does all the things that are really important to keep the wheels on. She does all the memberships. If you've ever spoken to membership, you'll be speaking to Vicky. Vicky does all the social media. She does all the accounting. She does all the graphic design work. Um, she does everything that keeps the wheels on. I do the politics and the talking. That's what I do. Yeah, but really, Vicky does most of that other work. Um, we have a freelancer who does some videography and another freelancer who does some editing. But they're part time, and it's largely me and Vicky that do the heavy lifting. But we do need to recruit more people to do more work, because there's so much work needs to be done. I could go into so many more details about the issues that we face internationally, the ways in which we're being attacked, the size of the problem that we have. We just need to be able to do more, in a nutshell. So that's what's next.
So, yeah, so I don't, yeah, link for website is interest also in the description. I'll post it again. I believe I mean, you can become a member for as little as £4 a month. Is that right?
Yeah. So let me hit you with a few ways that the people listening can help, because I think that's in the.
Most one, Bart's just on the survey.
Thank you, mate. The question there is any other way we can help. I can see. So yeah. So there's three ways that you can help. Um, the one way it should be is a bit obvious, because if you go onto our website, at the bottom of our website, you'll see a carousel of all the organizations that support us. These are the organizations that get it. These are the organizations that understand the mission. These are the organizations that I've sat down with and had a beer with, who realize how important what we do is. And these are the organizations that fund us. So what we'd like you to do is do business with the businesses that fund us, because they understand. Yeah. And if you do business with them, thank them for supporting responsible reptile keeping, because the more feedback they get, the more likely they are to continue supporting us. So that's the first thing. Now, there are two different ways that you can help us absolutely directly. One of them's free and one of them's easy. Yeah. The easiest one is just to join us as a member. Our memberships for keepers cost as little as £4 a month, I think it is, which if you're outside the UK is like €5 or $5. So for £4 a month, you can join. It's less than a cup of coffee,
Yep.
and it goes a long way because joining us does two things. Firstly, it provides a small amount of funding, yeah, but a very necessary amount of funding. But the second thing it does is it adds you to our community, and the bigger our community is, the more strength we have when we go to speak with politicians and legislators and journalists, and we say, we've got 1,000 members, we've got 5,000 members, we've got 10,000 members. That's a strong voice, and we're gradually building that voice all over the world. So that's easy. The easiest thing you can do is just sign up for £4 a month. Bang, done. Yeah. The other thing you can do is free, but it requires a little bit of your time, and it's probably equally important. And the other thing you can do is just share our stuff, subscribe to our platforms, comment on our stuff, because we can only kind of be successful if our voice is getting out there, if the stuff that we're broadcasting is being watched. And it only gets watched if you share it and if the algorithm loves it. And it only loves it if you share it. So subscribe to our channel. The algorithm loves it. Like all our stuff because the algorithm loves it. Tara's saying my reptile pick. Do my reptile pick because the algorithm loves it. Yeah. But subscribing and sharing just gets our voice out there. Even if you're only sharing it to your Auntie Betty, it's Auntie Betty that we need to convince, because you and all your mates know the score already. Auntie Betty doesn't know the score. Share it so that Auntie Betty sees it. Just share the hell out of all of it. Yeah, that's that's really the most important thing you can do. Share our stuff. Join as a member.
That's it. And it's transport if you become a member, especially I don't know, you do get a really sweet mug.
You do if you join on. I think it's £9 a month you have to
Yeah.
join on if you want a mug. Yeah.
Yeah, I want a mug.
Again, £9. Yeah.
That's
Do,
it.
do you
We
know
also
what?
get
Tell you
nice
what was
stickers.
really interesting. Oh, good. Yeah, you get a responsible reptile keeping sticker. People are really, really treasuring those. I think so. Back in the 90s, I launched a business selling reptile t-shirts with funky designs on, and it failed. And the reason it failed is because I've got no idea what t-shirts people want to wear, and I was producing these funky designs and nobody bought them. So when Vicky came to me and said, "Look, let's sell RRK t-shirts," I was like, "Nope, I've been there before. Listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. I've done this, and it's not a good idea." And in true Vicky fashion, she knew best, and she says, "No, I'm going to do it anyway." So she did it. She launched the merch, and it started to sell. And I was like, "Why? Why is our merchandise selling?" And I think it's selling because people want to belong to the community. People want to show their
Yeah.
allegiance to the mission. Yeah. And it actually made me a bit kind of sentimental about, and I went to an IHS show, and there were more people wearing our t-shirt than I ever believed could be possible. It was just such a beautiful thing to see. And it tears me up when I see our t-shirts out in the wild sometimes. It's pretty cool. It means we're making a difference.
There was someone at the entomology fair yesterday that was wearing a responsible
Was
reptile
there?
keeping
Oh,
t-shirt.
cool.
And I was like, "Oh, you're a supporter. I've got Tony coming on the
Nice
stream."
one. You're a comrade.
Sort of thing. So,
Well,
yeah,
to be
yeah,
more
it's
serious
definitely
about it,
getting seen. And
we sit in our little office on our little boat, hoping we're doing the right thing. Yeah. And I think we are, because I know my way around reptile keeping. I pretty much understand the topic that we're working with. So I think we're doing a good job. But it's not until we get invited on podcasts like this, or we get emails from people, or we see people wearing our t-shirt, or we see people sharing our stuff and saying how important it is. It's not until we see that we know we're on the right track. Yeah, it's the feedback we get from you guys that reassures us that we're doing right. And and I'm not just talking about good feedback, I'm talking about bad feedback as well. That when we make content, we're pretty sure we've made good content, and if there's anything good about it, we pretty almost definitely meant to do that. Yeah. What's really useful is if you guys come to us with suggestions, excuse me, suggestions and ideas on how we could do better. That's really useful to us because, like I say, we're just a small team doing our best. But when we've got a gang of people around us who know what they're doing, know what they're talking about, who can guide us and advise us, that's like having a really good, committee group of people to help us do things. More brains is better than just our two. And you guys are out there at the sharp end doing it all. You're running businesses, you're running podcasts, you're keeping animals, You guys are out there doing it.
Right. That's it. So yeah, Marshmallow hoodies are super comfortable. And Bart is currently browsing the merch.
Cool. We've
So,
had some
and that's
really
the
good
thing.
reports about our merch, actually. That we've had a few people say these are really nice. So yeah, that's quite pleasing.
I was wondering if people, especially now this day and age, they love merch. People absolutely love a bit of merch,
Yeah,
lots of things and stuff, and yeah. See, and then when people are sharing, oh, I'm now a member. I've got the stickers, got my mug or whatever. I'm gonna go. Oh, I want that. I want to be part of that. Sort of thing.
yeah. Well, it does kind of create a community that all tries to move in the right direction, is what we're hoping. And again, Vicky came up with the strap line for us, which is together we can make a difference. And this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to build a community that's not going to be nitpicking or flaming each other. We don't want infighting. We don't want holier than thou. I'm better at keeping than you. This guy's not doing, we don't want to cultivate that. We want to get everybody together. And I'm really pleased with how effective we've been at that. I'm really encouraged by being able to bring people together as a united front against our enemies. You look like a Game of Thrones man. Am I wrong?
I enjoyed Game of Thrones apart from the last season, of course.
Well, yeah, last season was a bit crap. But do you
But
remember
yeah,
when Jon Snow was trying to recruit the wildlings to become part of the army against the
yeah,
dead? Yeah,
yep,
that's how I feel. I feel like I'm trying to recruit all these different sections of the reptile trade and the hobby to bring them together against the true enemy, because
yeah.
we do have a true enemy, and that's I think we're doing pretty well at it. We don't get much infighting um, on our channels. We don't get much, backlash, and we don't get many people giving out grief. Everybody seems to want to be part of the community, and that's really encouraging for us.
I think we've got a common enemy, but also we've got something major in common with each other of our passion for our animals.
Yeah. And even if you disagree with the way somebody's keeping their animal, I think that we still have common values, and to work together. I'm sure some of the guys on this podcast are part of the Educate Don't Berate group. And that's such a brilliant concept. It's exactly where we should be going, exactly where we should be heading. It's, educate, don't berate. And
Yeah.
Luna saying she's from north of the wall, but Vicky's from Cumbria. So Vicky is definitely from north of the wall. She's definitely a wildling, I can tell you that.
But yeah, the thing is that educate don't right, with Lulabells and Tara and Riddlers and now your Pippin
Yeah,
friends stuff is absolutely fantastic stuff.
good on them.
And exactly what it's sort
It's
of
exactly the
the level stuff.
principle we want to cultivate.
That thing, and a whole host of different keepers that are a part of that, doing things differently to each other, but also going, this is how we do it. This is what we're doing, and trying to then literally kind of inspire people.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly it. I'm having trouble keeping up with all of these comments, My eyes are scanning the comment section. It's lively.
So is what trying to keep heading for the best care, but line's always moving, so we do what works and improve where we
Yeah.
can. As we again, it was actually AHH when Robert Mendyke came over from the States, and then done a talk. We've done a couple of talks. And he said of like the trajectory of animal welfare is always going up. We're always trying to aim for
Yes.
thriving. rivals up here. We're aiming.
Yeah.
I was like, and every time we improve, we move it again, and the designs always go upwards, kind of thing.
Well, that's a very interesting thing to discuss as well, because I'm sure you guys have all heard of Chaz from Snakes and Adders.
Yep.
Yeah, he's a really interesting fella and has got a really interesting perspective on pet keeping, shop keeping, and welfare, and I love it. And so he's at one end. You could say, if you wanted to be argumentative, that he's at one end of the scale selling leopard geckos in basic enclosures to kids. Yeah. And I'd say good. And then at the other end of the scale, you've got Francis Coscari, who's like the head of AHH, who's like pushing welfare just as far as it can go all the time. And I say, great. And you know what? Those two guys are the best of friends. Those two guys are the best of friends, and they discuss how they work together, and they discuss their levels of welfare, and they discuss best practice. And Francis is absolutely embracing of the fact that if we only work with like ultra welfare, then that's not accessible to most people. If we only keep leopard geckos in room size enclosures and play them Mozart every night and must give them a massage or whatever, I don't know, the most ultimate welfare you can do if you've got millions and millions of pounds, then how's some kid going to get his first bearded dragon or his own first corn snake? There is definitely a level of welfare that is perfectly adequate for a kid to get their first animal, and she can enjoy a leopard gecko in her bedroom or a crested gecko in her bedroom, and then she'll look and go, hey, I've been watching that guy online, I'll introduce a bit of this, I'll do a bit of that, oh, that's a good idea. And the concept of this constant movement upwards is absolutely fabulous. But as long as we can accept that this level here is perfectly acceptable place to start. Yeah. If you just look at, I can't remember, one of the viewers is into horses. I mean, if we look at horse welfare and reptile welfare, can we compare it? I don't know, but I'm definitely really impressed with the levels of welfare and knowledge that we've got in reptile keeping, And this brings me on to another topic, which is me changing topics halfway through a conversation, but I'm going to do it anyway, because this really brings me onto the crux of why responsible reptile keeping exists. You've been doing this for nearly as long as I have. We can agree that reptile keeping has just shot up in welfare over the last 10 years, let alone 20, 30.
I mean, when I started, UV was like, what's UV?
Exactly. We were using black lights and sunbed tubes. Yeah. A thermostat was a fish tank heater in a jam jar of water. Yeah. And that's what we used as a thermostat heater. But anyway, we could go on about the bad old days. But reptile keeping welfare and husbandry has improved dramatically. So why then, I ask you this question, are we getting more hassle from animal rights campaigners than ever before? Surely they should be saying, hey, those reptile keepers have really pulled their socks up. Look at this technology. Look at these improvements. Look at how long they live for in captivity. Look at how well they're doing. Maybe we'll leave them alone, but that's not what's happening. Why is that not happening? Why is it worse now than ever before? And the answer to that question is because our enemies have control of the narrative. Over the last 15 or 20 years, while we've been getting better at doing what we do, concentrating on our reptiles, ignoring what they're doing, they've been doubling down on the internet, spreading lies, spreading propaganda, and we've just not been addressing it. And this is something that we need to take control of. This is why responsible reptile keeping exists, because we need to tell the truth about what we're doing. We need to show the best sides of responsible reptile keeping so that people aren't misled by horror stories, and the people who are conducting horror stories pull their socks up and do things better. That's why we exist. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely perfectly put. So, and yeah, I was thinking, with the whole different levels of things on how Chaz does it in terms of getting the kids involved with their first reptile. So he's hopefully making keepers for life, sort of thing. That are going to be literally the next people pushing the welfare and stuff, and pushing new advances and everything. And then you've got France as some of the the other end.
We're not even guessing about this. We're not even guessing that these people are the reptile stores are seeding the new herpetologists of the future. We're seeing it. Several of Chaz's kids that he sold reptiles to as kids have now gone on to surpass his levels. One of them is running, I think, a blue iguana project in the Caribbean. Is it? I don't know. Doing like full on conservation
He's talking
herpetology.
about Luke Harding.
Yes, I am. Yeah, one of Chaz's early customers.
So Luke is now head of herpetology at the Monday Group, so Singapore Zoo and stuff.
This is it. Zoos aren't leading the way, and the ones that are getting seeded by keepers who started as keepers.
Yeah, and he bought like one of his first reptiles off Chaz many years ago, sort of thing. And
that's where we all start. That's where we need to get the ball rolling. We need to give these kids beetle larvae at the age of 10 years old and get them started. Did we do that bit on the podcast, or did we?
Yeah, we touched.
Or was it before the podcast?
No, we did do it. Yeah, on live. Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, yeah, this is it. We need to get those kids involved very early, and we need reptiles back in classrooms. We need pet stores to get people excited about keeping animals. You know, I've worked in retail for many years, and it brought me to tears almost to go into Chaz's shop and watch him interact with customers, with kids and their parents. You know, have you ever seen him at work? He's like, okay, whose responsibility is it to look after this reptile? And the kid looks up at the mom, and the mom's like, no. Chaz is like, no, it's your responsibility. And he gives them a little report to fill in every time it eats, every time it sheds its skin, every time it cleans it out. And he says, and I want you to fill it in, and then I want you to come back to me once every fortnight, and we'll have a conversation about what's happening and what to do next. And similarly, I watched Katie at KBN in Coventry doing the same stuff, and she was absolutely fantastic. It was lovely to see. And this is where they start. You've got to get people involved at that level, and then who knows what happens next.
And that's something like, again, in the invert circles with Invert Shows UK, something that they do at their shows is to have the Bugs for Kids table, where kids can come and they can get a tub of whether it be some basic isopods or some stick insects or snail, and it's got a little sticker on it, and this is my stick insect, and its name is, and I can write the name on it and stuff. So literally get the kids involved straight away, kind of thing, and it's all completely for free for them, and it's like hopefully you get hooked into it and stuff, and it then just perpetuates and stuff. And that's what happened with me when I was 7. And
because you work in a zoo now, right? So tell me if I'm right, that we're kind of hard to impress nowadays. We've been around a bit, when you've worked in a project that's bred bearded dragons and king cobras, and you've been catching chameleons in Madagascar. I'm difficult to impress. So when you go to a zoo and there's some kid absolutely spellbound, that's where the excitement is. When you go in a reptile store and there's some kid or even some adult absolutely spellbound by their reptiles, that's where the excitement is for me. That's what I enjoy seeing. I'm never getting tired of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, anytime. Yeah, if I'm not, I'm going to spend a few minutes and there's someone in one of my buildings that's really interested. It's like, right, I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to chat with you about it, sort of thing. It's whether it's a talk time or not. It's right.
It's talk time.
This, and engage. And sometimes I find like, oh, I'm sorry to say, but no, don't apologise. They're interested. They're engaged. That's what we want.
But that's how I started. I went into a reptile house in the Midlands, and it was massive. It was the biggest reptile house in Europe at the time, in Walsall. And I was a 15-year-old kid. I must have been a real pain in the arse, just pestering the owner for like hours and hours and hours about reptiles and animals. Yeah. And in the end, there was a note on the door saying help wanted. So I said, "Gives a job," and that's how I started. And you got to remember that at 15 years old, I was going around the pub and into the restaurant and sitting with the top reptile keepers in the world. And these reptile keepers would sit next to this annoying 15-year-old kid, and I'd just be asking questions. And they put up with it and they gave me all of that information. I look back now and I'm like, you guys must have had the patience of a saint. Yeah. ZooMed owner Gary Bagnall. Yeah.
Yep.
He came to visit us when I was like 15, and the poor bugger got sat next to me in the restaurant. So I was pestering him, and he gave me a T-shirt, right? And he reached in his bag and he gave me this T-shirt. He says, "There's only 3 of these T-shirts. I've got one. My manager's got one." He says, "And you've got the other one. So look after it." And I've still got that T-shirt. Nearly 40 years later, it's full of holes and it's stretched and it's faded, but I've still got that T-shirt. And when I went to ZooMed to ask them for funding, I took the T-shirt with me, and me and Gary Bagnall were nearly in tears. He didn't remember me from Adam, but I remembered him.
Yep. Yep, that's it. And it's those things of like, yeah, you inspire, hopefully, yeah, when anyone doing like any kind of educational thing, whether it be on social media, like, a bunch of us, a bunch of people in the chat and stuff, whether it be in the zoo setting, whether it be doing educational displays and stuff, hopefully, all our aim is normally, we've all got the same aim of inspiring that next generation.
Yeah. What else are we there for?
And stuff, and hoping that at some point, a kid's going to come back to us when they're on and be like, because of you, I've done this and I've gone on to do this. Exactly. Sort of thing.
Let me tell you a story about that. So, when I started responsible reptile keeping, I got I think it was about a year after we started. I got an email on the website from somebody who says, "I've been watching your videos, and can you tell me, is Tony the same Tony that used to run a reptile house in Birmingham?" And I said, "Yeah, this is me." And he says, "You might not remember me, but I used to come in your shop when I was like 12 or 13, and you sold me your first reptile." He says, "And you and Steve Irwin have got a lot to answer for," right? And then he showed me this, which was a note I wrote him about his first reptile. Yeah, he's still got this note that I wrote for him, this battered piece of paper, and it says, "Jack, put the snake in the viv and leave it alone for at least 5 days. As long as the temperature's right and it's got water, he'll be okay. Cover the front of the viv too and don't touch it, then it will feed." Yeah. And he's got that, and he's got the little feeding label that I gave him, and 30 years later he's still got it, and it blew me away. Absolutely blew me away. He's a good mate now. He might even be watching this, but his name's Jack Weston. You'll see him sharing our stuff. He's a really good guy.
Yeah, that's right. And it's things like that just it makes it all worthwhile. You're just like, I've done something. I've done, I've had a purpose. I've done something with myself.
Yeah,
and stuff. And whenever I have someone, I was like, oh yeah, the young lad who he comes to the park every so often and stuff, and he came here and came to one of my talks, and then decided to start getting, the odd invert and reptile, and he's grown his collection and stuff, and he's going into studying, the study animal management and stuff, and he's like really inspired by it all, and it's like absolutely fantastic sort of thing. And every time it's goes like, how's it going? How's the collection going? So.
And if you can build relationships like that, that's how education happens. This is the community looking after itself and avoiding the need for legislation. Because if we can self-regulate, governments love it if we self-regulate. It's cheap, they don't have to get themselves involved, and they know they've got the experts on the job. So the more we self-regulate, the less hassle we have from government. And how do you self-regulate? With exactly what you're talking about, educating people and informing people and nurturing people. It's how you do it. That's what we have to do.
Absolutely. So, Liz just asked whether you was at AHH this year. I don't believe you were at AHH, were you?
Oh no, I wasn't. I've been foiled 2 years in a row. So not this year, but last year, I wanted to go, but I was invited to present at the Norwegian Pet Trade Conference about responsible reptile keeping. So I was in Norway in 2023, and then, or what? In fact, when was the last one?
So last
It's
one
March,
was,
wasn't it? Yeah,
yeah, was this
yeah.
March, yeah.
So
I
March
believe
24, I was in
last
Norway.
year there was a video presentation last year, I think.
That's right. So
I
I sent the
believe.
video presentation.
Yeah.
And then last year I was invited to do exactly the same, but this time in Sweden. This year, sorry, March this year, this last one was I was in Sweden doing pretty much exactly the same thing. And just by coincidence, I was over there at exactly the same time when they proposed that ridiculous ban on feeding insects, that you couldn't feed insects to your animals and couldn't work with your nocturnal animals during the daytime, and your enclosures had to be the size of a small garage. Um, yeah, so I've missed it twice now. It's definitely on my list to go. I'd I'd probably be there more as an observer than as than working, because we tend to work. The experts at AHH tend to do their thing well enough without us. We never want to, you know, we're not part of the husbandry advancement movement simply because we're not qualified. Those guys do a far better job than we could. So that's their job, and it's good to watch them do that.
So they said, yeah, hopefully we'll be able to come at some point. And you won't miss her in a neon pink wheelchair in there.
Oh, I'll keep my eye open for you. Keep your eye
Okay.
open for me, and give me a
And
nudge if you see me.
Losers said that you're often at IHS too.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a stand at the IHS this year, but I'm not sure. But yeah,
If we do, I'll try and because I should be at IHS. I'll try and make sure I come. And so I think been last time we was at IHS, I was just well, my parents trade, they do the all the soft toys and stuff. And it was just
yeah,
such a busy day. I don't think I saw it.
yeah.
So,
That's what it's like when you're on a stand at the IHS. It's so crazy. But the IHS is being held in my stomping ground. I used to live in the well, at the bottom of the hill where the IHS is being held this year. I used to live. My boat used to be at the bottom of the hill in Bingley, right next door to where the IHS is being held this year. So it's my old stomping ground.
okay. So
Nice part of the world.
that's that. So yeah, I should be. Well, we'll be at IHS. So oh well, we've gone past half. Well, it's nearly 20 to 11, so I'm aware of the time sort of thing. Yeah, no, but this has been absolutely fantastic.
I can keep going. Vicky often says that if you keep putting coins in the back of my head, I'll keep talking. So just so you know.
Yeah, no, it's been absolutely fantastic, Tony. Yeah, once again, yeah, thanks for saying that. Yeah, agreeing to come on and
Not at all. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, very important topics to discuss and stuff. And yeah, I think the time has completely flown by.
It has.
So,
Yeah. I mean, in closing, what I'd probably say then is that the people watching this podcast and everybody that keeps animals should really focus on that, because that's what you do best, and that's what you got into keeping for. and that's what keeps us going, really, because you guys do such great work. You shouldn't have to focus on the politics. You shouldn't have to worry about what's going on with people wanting to ban these animals or curtail it. Leave that to us. All you have to do is support us in our work, and if you support us, we'll work our asses off to look after you. And it's not easy. We're not well funded. Nobody's getting rich doing this. Before we launched Responsible Reptile Keeping, Vicky and I ran a museum's communication media company, producing information for zoos and interpretation for museums. But I just kept getting angry at what I was seeing online. People talking about reptile keepers, the propaganda, and I was saying somebody should do something. This is terrible. Somebody should do something about this. And eventually Vicky sat me down and said, look, either a lot of people do a lot of talking. you usually don't just talk, you usually do something. So either do something or shut the hell up. So I had to do something. So we decided to launch Responsible Reptile Keeping, and that's the communication skills that we use in museums is exactly what's useful when we work for reptiles too. So that allows us to communicate effectively. But I just couldn't sit by on the sidelines and watch it going on. I felt compelled to do something, and thankfully Vicky's jumped on board and is essential to what we do as well. So it seems to be a useful partnership that we have here.
No, definitely. I think, yeah, well, it's only massive. Yeah, thank you to the both of you for the work that you guys are doing, and yeah,
You're very welcome.
highlighting things to us that perhaps we wouldn't hear otherwise and stuff. So yeah, certainly, encourage everyone to check out the links in the description of the stream and stuff, and wherever your favorite platform is, TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook,
we'll be there. Yeah,
share as much as you can, like as much as you can to build that algorithm up and stuff. And
yes, please.
And stuff that even if that's all you can do, that helps out so much. And stuff. And,
absolutely, thank you.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. So yes,
and if you have any questions. If you have any questions, just send us a message on the website. We always answer questions. If it's a long question, we'll usually arrange a call and have a chat with you. We're all about interacting, and we're all about listening to you guys. So do give us a shout.
That's it. Yep, and fill in the survey if you haven't already. Even if you've just got one reptile, fill it in. So
yes, please.
So thanks for that. So yeah, and hopefully we'll at some point have to have you on again when there's perhaps more things sort of going on, or your next sort of project and stuff.
Well, there's always stuff going on. We could always talk in more detail about any one of the topics that we've discussed. What we've done here is a broad overview, but there's so much detail going on. We could talk about what's happening in America. We could talk about what's happening in Sweden. We could talk about positive lists. We could talk about CITES. There are so many things with so much detail. If anybody's got any questions, hit me up. Happy to answer them. If anybody wants to discuss a particular topic, more than happy to do that. There's so much it's such a complex issue. I just appreciate you guys giving me the time to explain the essence of it here. So thank you very much. It's been really enjoyable.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like I say, I said right at the beginning, I was like, this is going to be one of the most important streams I've ever done and stuff in terms of hopefully, getting that information out to some people that perhaps haven't heard it and stuff. So yeah, absolutely fantastic. But
I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks again for coming on. It's been absolutely fantastic stuff. And thanks for everyone who's watched, especially from the beginning, and asked some fantastic questions throughout.
Yep.
And stuff. It's been absolutely fantastic. And but with that, we'll wish everyone a good night, and I'll do the outro video.
Right. Thank you very much, guys. Good evening.
Bye.